The gunshot echoed through the canyon before Cole Rourke even saw the face of the man he'd saved. The Apache woman stood over the dying bounty hunter, her hands still bound, her eyes holding secrets darker than the desert night. Behind them, flames consumed what remained of the slaver's wagon. Ahead, nothing but sand and blood-red horizon. Cole had one bullet left. She had nothing but rage. This is the story of two souls who refused to die, and the crossing they built between vengeance and redemption. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. Let me see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stay until the end, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about survival. The desert didn't forgive. It took everything: water, hope, the illusion that a man's past could stay buried. Cole Rourke had learned that the hard way, one blistered mile at a time, under a sun that burned like divine punishment. He'd been walking for 3 days, maybe 4. Time had a way of blurring when your canteen ran dry and your memories became the only company worth keeping. The war had ended 2 years ago, but Cole still carried it in his bones, the weight of rifle smoke, the screams of men who died calling for mothers who'd never hear them, the particular silence that followed a cavalry charge gone wrong. He'd deserted, not out of cowardice, but out of something worse, the realization that the cause he'd been fighting for was built on lies, and the men giving orders were more interested in medals than lives. So one night, under cover of a moonless sky, Cole Rourke had walked away from his unit, his uniform, and the only identity he'd known since he was 17. Now he was 26 and looked 40. The desert did that to a man. His boots were splitting at the seams, held together by rawhide strips he'd carved from his own belt. His shirt, once blue, had faded to the color of dust. The hat on his head, wide-brimmed, sweat-stained, was the only thing between him and certain death from sunstroke. And in his pocket he carried $1 silver, his last. The town appeared like a mirage at first, a smudge of wood and desperation shimmering on the horizon. As Cole drew closer, the details sharpened. Buildings leaning at angles that defied both architecture and hope. A main street rutted with wagon tracks and horse shit, windows either boarded up or broken. This wasn't a town. It was a carcass. But even carcasses could offer shelter. Cole's throat was so dry that swallowing felt like grinding glass. His vision swam at the edges, black spots dancing in the peripheral. He needed water. Food would be a blessing, but water was survival. The first building he passed had been a general store once. Now it was just walls and memory, the door hanging from a single hinge, the interior stripped clean by scavengers or time or both. A dog, ribs showing, fur matted, watched him from the shade with eyes that held no hope of kindness. Cole kept walking. Further down the street, he heard voices. Laughter, rough and mean, the kind that came from men who'd found entertainment in cruelty. Cole had heard that sound before, in army camps, in prisoner pens, in places where humanity went to die. He should have kept walking, should have found water, spent his last dollar on supplies, and disappeared back into the desert before the sun went down. But Cole Rourke had always been cursed with a conscience he couldn't quite kill. The saloon squatted at the end of the street like a toad, its facade painted a faded red, the words "Lucky Strike" barely visible on a sign that creaked in the hot wind. Piano music drifted through the bat-wing doors, something jaunty and out of place, played by hands that didn't care about harmony. Cole pushed through. The smell hit him first. Unwashed bodies, spilled whiskey, tobacco smoke thick enough to chew. Oil lamps hung from the ceiling, their light struggling against the gloom. A bar ran along the left side of the room, bottles lined up behind it like soldiers waiting for orders. Tables scattered the space, some occupied by card players, others by men nursing drinks and grievances in equal measure. And in the center of it all stood a makeshift platform. Cole's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and what he saw made his stomach turn. A woman stood on that platform, her wrists bound with leather straps attached to a rope that hung from a ceiling beam. Her feet were bare, her dress, if you could call it that, torn and filthy. But it wasn't her condition that stopped Cole in his tracks. It was her eyes. She was Apache. That much was clear from the sharp angles of her face, the midnight black of her hair, the copper tone of her skin marked with dust and bruises. But what struck Cole wasn't her heritage. It was the absolute absence of fear in her gaze. She wasn't broken. Not yet. A man circled the platform like a carnival barker, his vest embroidered with tarnished silver buttons, his smile revealing teeth that had given up on whiteness years ago. He held a riding crop in one hand, gesturing with theatrical flourish. "Gentlemen, gentlemen!" His voice cut through the piano music. "What am I bid for this fine specimen of Apache womanhood? Strong as a mule, clever as a fox, and, I can personally attest, spirited enough to keep a man entertained through the long desert nights." Laughter erupted from the crowd. Crude suggestions. Offers shouted in slurred voices. Cole felt his hands curl into fists. He'd seen this before. Different town, different war, same sickness. During the campaigns, he'd watched officers trade captured women like poker chips, justifying it with rhetoric about civilization and manifest destiny. He'd been too young then, too indoctrinated, to understand what he was witnessing. He understood now. $5, someone shouted. "I got 10, another voice countered. The barker grinned wider. $10. Do I hear 15? Cole's throat worked, but no sound came out. His mouth was too dry, his tongue thick with thirst and fury. He took a step forward, then another, weaving between tables toward the bar. The bartender was a boulder of a man, bald as an egg, with arms that suggested he'd built the bar with his bare hands and wouldn't hesitate to tear it down if provoked. He looked at Cole with the expression of someone who'd seen every kind of desperate man and found them all equally tiresome. "Water," Cole rasped. "2 bits. Cole dug into his pocket, feeling the weight of his last silver dollar. He could buy water, maybe some jerky, and still have enough left for $15. The barker's voice carried over the crowd. "Going once." Cole's eyes found the woman again. She was looking directly at him now, her gaze cutting through the smoke and noise like a blade. Not pleading, not even asking, just measuring, deciding whether he was another predator or something else. In that moment, Cole saw everything that was wrong with the world, and everything that was wrong with him. He'd spent 2 years running from his failures, from the things he'd done and the things he'd failed to do, convinced that survival was enough, that keeping his head down and his conscience quiet was a viable path forward. But some things couldn't be walked away from. Some things demanded you stand. $25, Cole heard himself say. The room went quiet. The piano player's hands stilled on the keys. Every head turned toward the bar, toward the dusty scarecrow of a man who'd just spoken. The barker's eyes narrowed. "You got $25, friend?" Cole pulled out his silver dollar and placed it on the bar with a solid clink. "I got this." The silence deepened. Someone laughed, short, sharp, disbelieving. "That's $1, the barker said slowly, as if explaining mathematics to a child. "It's all I got," Cole replied. His voice was steady now, the dryness in his throat forgotten. "And it's all she's worth to you anyway. You're not getting 25 out of this crowd. Look at them, half drunk, half broke, and the other half too smart to throw good money at trouble." The woman's eyes hadn't left him. Cole felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. The barker's smile had vanished. He tapped the writing crop against his palm, a rhythmic threat. "You making fun of my merchandise?" "I'm making an observation," Cole said. "You want to auction her proper, take her to Santa Fe, to a real market. But you won't, because you stole her from wherever you found her, and you're looking to make quick money before someone comes asking questions." The crop stopped tapping. "You got a big mouth for a man with empty pockets." "Empty pockets make a man honest," Cole replied. "Can't afford to lie." For a long moment, the barker studied him, taking in the worn boots, the sun-ravaged face, the eyes that had seen things men shouldn't see. Whatever calculation happened behind that greasy smile, it resulted in a shrug. $1, the barker said. "But you take her as is. No refunds, no complaints. She tries to run. She tries to kill you in your sleep. That's your problem, not mine." Cole nodded. He picked up the silver dollar and walked it over to the barker, placing it in the man's outstretched palm. The coin seemed to weigh more than it should, like he was paying with something that couldn't be measured in currency. The barker pocketed the dollar and climbed onto the platform. With practiced efficiency, he untied the rope from the ceiling beam, coiling it around his hand until the woman was pulled forward, stumbling slightly as her bound wrists forced her balance. "She's all yours, friend." The barker handed Cole the end of the rope like a leash. "Congratulations on your purchase." Cole took the rope. The hemp felt rough against his palm, warm from the barker's grip. He looked at the woman, really looked at her. Up close, he could see the defiance burning in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw was set like she was ready to bite through steel if given the chance. "Come on," Cole said quietly. He turned and walked toward the door, the rope slack in his hand, not pulling, not forcing. Behind him, he heard her footsteps, hesitant at first, then steady. The crowd parted, men stepping aside with expressions ranging from amusement to contempt to something darker. As they reached the batwing doors, a voice called out, "Hey, stranger!" Cole stopped, didn't turn. "You're making a mistake," the voice continued. It belonged to an old man sitting alone at a corner table, his face mapped with scars and bad decisions. "Apache woman ain't like the civilized kind. She'll gut you first chance she gets." Cole glanced back over his shoulder. "Then I guess I better not give her a reason." He pushed through the doors and back into the scorching embrace of the desert sun. Outside, the heat was a living thing, pressing down with malevolent intent. Cole led the woman away from the saloon, down the rutted street toward the edge of town where the buildings gave way to scrub and sand. He could feel her resistance in the rope, not pulling against him, but not yielding either. A careful tension, like a drawn bowstring waiting for the right moment. When they reached the last building, an abandoned livery stable with a collapsed roof, Cole stopped. He turned to face her, reached into his belt, and pulled out a folding knife. Her entire body coiled. Her eyes tracked the blade with the focus of a predator watching prey. Cole held up his free hand, palm out, in a gesture of peace. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached for the rope binding her wrists. "Hold still," he said. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The knife was sharp, one of the few things Cole had maintained with religious care during his time in the desert. It sliced through the rope in 2 clean cuts, and the bindings fell away, leaving red marks on her wrists where the hemp had chafed. The woman stared at her freed hands, then at Cole, then back at her hands. "You're free," Cole said, folding the knife and returning it to his belt. "I didn't buy you to own you. I bought you to cut you loose. Do what you want with that." For the first time since he'd seen her, something flickered across her face. Not gratitude, but confusion. Suspicion. The look of someone who'd been tricked too many times to believe in simple acts of kindness. She rubbed her wrists, her eyes never leaving his face. "Why?" The word came out rough, accented, like speaking English cost her something. "Because it was the right thing to do," Cole said. "Right." She repeated the word like it was foreign, laughable. "White man's right got my village burned, got my brother killed, got me chained in that place." Cole felt the accusation land. He had no defense against it, nothing that wouldn't sound hollow or self-serving. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "Sorry." Another word tasted and found wanting. Sorry doesn't bring back the dead. "No," Cole agreed. "It doesn't." They stood in the dying light, 2 people shaped by violence, connected by a single impulsive choice. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of creosote and dry earth. "You got a name?" Cole asked. She hesitated, like even that small piece of herself was too valuable to give freely. "Tala," she finally said. "Tala Redhawk." "Cole Rourke." Tala tested his name silently, her lips moving without sound. Then she looked past him, toward the open desert, her expression calculating. "You got water?" she asked. "No." "Food?" "No." "Horse?" "No." Her eyebrow raised slightly, the first hint of something that might have been humor in a different context. "You got nothing?" "Pretty much." Tala crossed her arms. Despite the torn dress, the bruises, the dirt, she carried herself with a pride that armor couldn't replicate. "Then you're already dead. Just don't know it yet." Cole couldn't argue with that assessment. He'd been operating on borrowed time since his canteen ran dry 2 days ago. His body was running on fumes and stubbornness, and both were in short supply. "Probably," he admitted, "but I'll be dead free. That's better than some alternatives." Tala studied him with those sharp eyes, and Cole had the distinct impression he was being weighed against standards he couldn't see, tested by criteria formed in a world he'd only glimpsed from the outside. Finally, she uncrossed her arms. There's a spring, she said. Half-day's walk northwest. If we leave now, we make it before the moon's full up. We? You cut me loose. That makes you either the stupidest white man I've met or... She paused, searching for words. Something else. I haven't decided which, but I know this desert. You don't. You go alone, you die alone. You follow me, maybe you live. Cole felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. Why help me? Tala's expression hardened. I'm not helping you, I'm using you. Big difference. Desert's dangerous for a woman alone. Less so with a man, even a stupid one. You keep up, you stay useful, I'll get you to water. After that, we go separate ways. It was the most pragmatic offer Cole had received in months. Deal, he said. Tala nodded once, sharp and final. Then she turned and started walking, not toward the road, but into the raw desert, where civilization's thin veneer gave way to honest brutality. Cole followed. What? The desert at sunset was a study in contradictions, beautiful and merciless, painted in colors that would make artists weep, hiding death behind every rock and shadow. Tala moved through it like she was part of the landscape itself, her bare feet finding purchase where Cole saw only loose sand and sharp stones. She didn't speak as they walked, and Cole didn't push for conversation. Words cost water, and they had none to spare. Instead, he focused on matching her pace, on not stumbling, on ignoring the way his vision kept trying to blur at the edges. The sun dropped toward the horizon, turning the sky into a furnace of orange and red and purple. Long shadows stretched across the earth, making the terrain treacherous. Cole's feet had gone numb hours ago, which was a blessing because it meant he couldn't feel the fresh blisters forming or the old ones breaking. Tala stopped so suddenly that Cole almost walked into her. She held up a hand, her body perfectly still, her head cocked like she was listening to something Cole couldn't hear. He froze, his instincts, dulled by thirst but not dead, screaming warnings. For a long moment, nothing. Just the wind and the distant cry of a hawk. Then Tala moved. She dropped into a crouch and crawled forward to a cluster of rocks, her movements liquid and silent. Cole followed, less gracefully, his knees protesting as they hit the rocky ground. From their vantage point behind the rocks, Cole saw what had stopped her. A small depression in the earth, no bigger than a wagon bed, filled with dark shapes that didn't match the surrounding terrain. Bodies. 3 of them. Cole's military training kicked in automatically, assessing the scene with the cold efficiency of someone who'd seen too many dead men. 2 were sprawled face down, their backs showing the distinctive entry wounds of rifle fire. The third sat slumped against a rock, his head lolled back, his throat a ruin of dried blood. They'd been dead for at least a day. Maybe 2. Bandits, Tala whispered. Killed each other over loot. Happens. Cole's eyes scanned the bodies, looking for there. A canteen still strapped to the belt of the man with the destroyed throat. And near the other bodies, saddlebags that might contain food, ammunition, anything useful. Wait here, Cole said. No. Tala's hand shot out, gripping his arm with surprising strength. Could be trap. Bodies are bait sometimes. Could be, Cole agreed. But we need that water. I'll be careful. He started to rise, but Tala's grip tightened. You die stupid. I die angry. Don't make me angry. Despite everything, the thirst, the exhaustion, the dead men 20 feet away, Cole felt the corner of his mouth twitch. I'll try not to. He moved forward in a low crouch, his hand instinctively reaching for a sidearm he no longer carried. The service revolver had been sold 3 towns back for food that had lasted 2 days. Now he had his knife and his fists, and neither were worth much against bullets. The first body yielded nothing, pockets already looted, probably by the man who'd killed him. The second was more promising, a Colt Navy revolver still in its holster, 2 rounds left in the cylinder based on the weight. Cole took it, along with the leather pouch that jingled with the sound of loose ammunition. The third body, the one with the canteen, required Cole to step fully into the depression. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that Tala was right about the trap, but his body was making demands his brain couldn't override. Water. He reached for the canteen, his fingers closing around sun-warmed leather, and something inside him sang with desperate relief. He lifted it from the dead man's belt, testing the weight. half full. It felt like salvation. Cole was turning to signal Tala when he heard it, the distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked. Not one, three. "Don't move, friend." The voice came from above, from the rocks that formed the depression's rim. Cole's eyes flicked up and found them. 3 men, positioned at different angles, rifles aimed with the casual confidence of people who'd done this before. Ambush. The bodies were bait. Tala had been right. Cole's hand tightened on the canteen, his mind racing through options. The revolver at his belt was useless. He'd be dead before he cleared leather. Running would just make the bullets find him faster. That left talking. "Easy," Cole said, raising his free hand while keeping the canteen in his grip. "I'm just a traveler, no quarrel with anyone." The speaker, a lean man with a face like weathered leather and eyes that held no mercy, smiled without warmth. "See? That's where you're wrong, friend. Anyone in this desert's got a quarrel with someone. That's just the nature of things." He nodded toward the canteen. "That water you're holding, that's ours now. The gun too, and anything else you might be carrying." "I've got nothing," Cole said. "This canteen and the gun are all I found." "Then you're a poor man indeed." The lean man's smile widened. "But I'll tell you what, we're Christian folk, believe it or not. We'll leave you your life, can't say fairer than that." Cole heard movement behind him. Tala, emerging from the rocks with her hands raised, her expression carefully blank. The lean man's eyes locked onto her, and something ugly passed across his face. "Well, well, Apache girl, that changes things." "She's got nothing to do with this," Cole said quickly. "Oh, I disagree. See, there's a bounty on Apache taken alive, $20, payable in silver, no questions asked. Now you're in a bad spot, friend, but you just got lucky, because we're going to take the girl and let you walk. That's generous, you ask me?" Cole felt his hand move toward the revolver before his brain caught up. He stopped himself, barely. "Not happening," he said. The lean man sighed like a schoolteacher dealing with a difficult student. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Story of my life." "You willing to die for an Apache squaw you probably just met?" Cole thought about that question. About the war he'd deserted, the men he'd failed, the years he'd spent running from anything that resembled principle. About a dirty saloon and a woman with eyes that refused to break. "Yeah," he said. "I guess I am." The lean man's expression shifted, disappointment mixed with something that might have been respect. "Damn shame. I hate killing a man with balls." The rifle came up. Everything slowed. Cole saw the finger tightening on the trigger, saw the slight shift in the barrel's angle, saw his death approaching at the speed of a thought. His hand moved, not for the revolver, but throwing the canteen with all the strength his parched body could summon. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it didn't need to be. The canteen struck the lean man's rifle just as he fired, knocking the barrel up. The shot went wide, the bullet singing past Cole's ear close enough to feel the heat. Cole lunged forward, diving low, his hand finally reaching the Colt. More gunfire erupted, but not at him. Tala had moved, impossibly fast, throwing herself to the side and grabbing a rock the size of a man's head. She hurled it at the second rifleman with accuracy that defied reason. It caught him in the chest, knocking him backward off his perch with a startled yelp. Cole rolled, came up with the Colt extended, and fired. The revolver barked once, twice. The first shot missed, the second didn't. The lean man went down, clutching his shoulder, his rifle clattering among the rocks. The third man, young, barely 20, his face white with shock, swung his rifle toward Tala. Cole didn't think. He fired his last round, and the young man's rifle exploded in his hands as the bullet struck the stock, sending splinters and panic in equal measure. Then silence, broken only by harsh breathing and the wind. Cole stood slowly, the empty Colt still extended, his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. Tala rose from her crouch, her eyes scanning the rocks for threats. The lean man was alive, groaning, his shoulder bleeding but not arterial. The young man was clutching his hands, splinters embedded in his palms, his rifle destroyed. The second man, the one Tala had hit with the rock, wasn't moving, but Cole could see the rise and fall of his chest. "We need to go," Tala said. Her voice was steady, but Cole saw the tension in her shoulders. "They'll have friends. Always do." Cole nodded. He moved to the lean man, keeping the empty gun pointed at him, hoping the man was too shocked to realize it was empty, and quickly searched his pockets. Ammunition for the Colt, a small bag of jerky, and another canteen full this time. "You're making enemies you can't afford," the lean man gasped through gritted teeth. "Seems to be my specialty," Cole replied. He grabbed the supplies and backed away, never turning his back on the wounded men. Tala was already moving, heading northwest again, her pace faster now, urgent. Cole followed, slinging the canteen over his shoulder. Behind them, the wounded men didn't pursue. They'd learned their lesson, or at least they'd learned that their intended victims were more trouble than expected. They walked through the night. Tala set a punishing pace, and Cole kept up through sheer willpower, his legs moving mechanically while his mind tried to process what had just happened. He'd killed men before, in the war, in circumstances that brass buttons and flags were supposed to make honorable. But this felt different. Raw, more personal. The moon rose, full and bright, turning the desert into a landscape of silver and shadow. Tala finally slowed as they reached a narrow canyon, its walls rising steep on either side, barely wide enough for two horses to pass abreast. "Here," she said. She led him through the canyon's mouth and around a bend where the walls opened into a small amphitheater of rock. In the center, impossibly green against the pale stone, grew a cluster of cottonwood trees. Water. The spring bubbled up from between two rocks, clear and cold, gathering in a small pool before disappearing back into the earth. It was the most beautiful thing Cole had seen in years. Tala knelt at the pool's edge and drank, cupping water in her hands, her movements efficient but reverent. Cole joined her, the first sip hitting his tongue like lightning, his body screaming its gratitude. They drank until they couldn't drink anymore. Then they sat back against the rocks, the canteens filled, their bodies beginning the slow process of recovery. "You can shoot," Tala said finally. It wasn't a question. "I used to." "Used to?" Cole looked at his hands, calloused, scarred, still steady despite everything. "I was cavalry, 5 years. Fought in the territories, fought in the war. Got good at killing." He paused. "Too good, maybe. Started to wonder if that was all I was, just a man who knew how to make other men dead." So you ran?" "So I ran." Tala was quiet for a moment, her fingers trailing in the water. "My brother used to say that running and fighting are the same thing, just depends on which direction you're moving." "Sounds like a smart man." "He was." Past tense, heavy with loss. "The soldiers came to our village 3 moons ago, said we were on land that didn't belong to us anymore. My brother tried to negotiate, tried to explain that our people had been there since the stars were young." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "They shot him while he was talking, didn't even let him finish." Cole felt the weight of that grief, familiar and terrible. "I'm sorry." "You said that already. Still doesn't help." Tala stood, brushing dust from her torn dress. "But you fought for me. Stupid as it was, you fought. That counts for something." She walked to the far side of the spring, where the shadows were deepest, and sat down with her back against the canyon wall. Within moments, her breathing had evened out. Not sleep, but the watchful rest of someone who'd learned to never fully let their guard down. Cole remained by the water, listening to the night sounds of the desert. An owl called somewhere above. Insects hummed their ancient songs. The spring whispered its endless conversation with the earth. He thought about the men they'd left wounded in the rocks, about the barker in the saloon, about all the violence that seemed to follow him like a shadow, no matter how far he ran. Maybe Tala's brother had been right. Maybe running and fighting were the same. Just motion without purpose, without anything resembling redemption. Cole closed his eyes, the revolver heavy in his belt, and tried to remember what peace felt like. It didn't come. But the water was cold, and the stars were bright. And for now, for this one night in this one place, he was alive. And so was she. That would have to be enough. Dawn came slowly, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and amber. Cole woke to find Tala already moving, gathering supplies with efficient purpose. She'd found wild onions growing near the spring and had wrapped them in her torn dress's hem. "We need to keep moving," she said without preamble. "Those men from yesterday, They work for someone bigger. When they don't come back, questions get asked. Cole sat up, his body protesting every movement. He was 40 years old in spirit, 26 in calendar years, and felt every day of both. Where are we going? Tala paused, her expression unreadable. There's a place. 3 days northeast. What's left of my people gather there sometimes. Not many, maybe 20, 30 if we're lucky. But it's safer than here. Will they welcome a white man? No. She said it flatly without apology. But they won't kill you right away either. That's the best I can offer. Cole nodded. It was more than he deserved. They filled the canteens, ate the jerky sparingly, and set out as the sun crested the canyon rim. The terrain grew rougher as they traveled. More rocks, less sand, the earth rising and falling in jagged waves that made every step a negotiation. Tala led, her feet finding paths Cole couldn't see, her body moving with the unconscious grace of someone who'd learned the land's language before learning words. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it was practical. Warnings about loose rock, observations about animal tracks, occasional instructions delivered in terse sentences. By midday, they reached a plateau overlooking a shallow valley. Tala stopped at the edge, her eyes scanning the terrain below with predatory focus. What is it? Cole asked. Riders, 2, maybe 3, following our trail. Cole looked but saw nothing except heat shimmer and scrub. You sure? Tala gave him a look that suggested the question was insulting. They're not being careful, which means either they're very good or very stupid. She crouched, her fingers touching the ground like she was reading Braille. My guess? Same men from yesterday, or their friends. Can we lose them? In this terrain? No, it's too open. Tala stood, brushing her hands together. We make a stand or we run until they catch us tired. Either way, we fight. But Cole checked the Colt. 5 rounds now, after reloading from the ammunition he'd taken. Not much, but enough if he was smart and lucky. There, Tala pointed to a formation of rocks about 100 yards to the east. High ground, cover, narrow approach. Best chance we'll get. They moved quickly, scrambling over rocks and through scrub, reaching the formation with minutes to spare. It was perfect. A natural fortress, with sight lines in 3 directions and protection from above. Cole positioned himself behind a boulder, the Colt ready, his breathing controlled despite his racing heart. Tala found her own spot, armed with nothing but rocks and determination. They waited. The riders appeared exactly where Tala had predicted. 3 of them, moving in a loose formation, their horses picking careful paths through the rocky ground. Even from a distance, Cole recognized the lean man from yesterday. His shoulder bandaged, but his spine straight, his face set with the kind of determination that came from wounded pride. That's far enough, Cole called out when they were about 50 yards away. The riders stopped. The lean man raised a hand, signaling his companions to halt. We got business, you and me, he called back. His voice carried easily in the clear air. You shot me, stole from me. Can't let that stand. You tried to rob us, Cole replied. Self-defense isn't theft. Lawyer words don't mean shit out here. There's only what you can take and what you can hold. Then I guess we're holding pretty well. The lean man laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You got spirit. I'll give you that. But you're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. Hand over the girl, and I'll let you walk. You got my word. Beside Cole, Tala tensed. Your word doesn't mean shit either, Cole said. True enough. The lean man shifted in his saddle. So here's the other option. We kill you, take the girl anyway, and collect the bounty. Your choice which way this goes. Cole's finger rested on the trigger. The distance was long for a revolver, possible but not guaranteed. And even if he dropped one, that left 2 with rifles who could pick him apart from range. Bad odds. Very bad odds. He was preparing to answer when Tala spoke, her voice carrying with surprising strength. You want me? Come take me. The challenge hung in the air, clear and direct. The lean man smiled. Happy to oblige. He dismounted, his companions following suit. They spread out, rifles ready, advancing in a formation that spoke of military training, or at least hard experience. Professional, careful, deadly. Cole aimed at the lean man, the leader, the one who'd coordinate the attack. Take him down, and maybe the others would break. Maybe. The distance closed. 40 yards, 30. Cole's world narrowed to the front sight of his revolver, to his breathing, to the calculations of angle and drop, and the way the wind was blowing left to right. 20 yards. He fired. The shot boomed across the rocks, and the lean man went down, clutching his leg. Not a killing shot, but enough to take him out of the fight. Return fire erupted immediately. Bullets whined off rock, sending chips of stone flying. Cole ducked, rolled, came up in a new position. Fired again, missed. Tala was moving too, throwing rocks with mechanical precision, each one forcing the attackers to duck, to flinch, to waste precious seconds on defense instead of offense. But there were still 2 of them with rifles, and Cole had 3 bullets left. The math wasn't good. One of the riflemen broke cover, running forward in a crouch, trying to flank their position. Cole tracked him, led him by a fraction, and fired. The man went down hard, his rifle flying from his hands. 2 bullets. The last attacker, a heavy-set man with a beard that obscured half his face, realized he was alone. Cole saw the calculation happen in real time. Pride versus survival, vengeance versus self-preservation. Survival won. The bearded man backed away, his rifle still raised but his movements defensive. He reached his companions, helped the lean man to his horse, and together they retreated, not running, but withdrawing with the bitter dignity of men who'd lost but lived. Cole kept the Colt trained on them until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did he lower the gun. His hands were shaking, not from fear, that would come later, but from adrenaline crash, from the sudden realization of how close they'd come to dying in this nameless place. Tala appeared at his side, her breathing heavy, a cut on her cheek from flying rock chips. "You can shoot," she said again. This time it sounded like approval. "Luck," Cole replied. "Luck runs out, skill doesn't." She looked at him with those sharp eyes, reassessing. "You're more than you look like." "Most people are." "True." Tala turned toward the northeast, toward the place she'd mentioned, the gathering of what remained of her people. "Come on, we've got distance to cover before they come back with friends." "Will they?" "Count on it. Men like that don't stop. They just pause." They walked through the afternoon and into evening, putting as much ground as possible between themselves and the fight. The terrain gradually shifted, becoming more forgiving, less rock, more sand, the occasional appearance of scrub vegetation that suggested water somewhere below ground. As the sun set, painting the world in familiar oranges and reds, Tala finally allowed them to stop. They made camp in a dry wash, using stones to build a small fire that would be invisible to anyone more than 100 yards away. The jerky was nearly gone, divided into portions that mocked hunger rather than satisfied it. But they had water, and water was life. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, the flames small and precise, burning mesquite branches that Tala had gathered with the eye of someone who knew exactly which wood would burn hot and produce minimal smoke. "Tell me about the war," Tala said suddenly. Cole looked up from the flames. "Why?" "Because I need to know who I'm traveling with. You fight like a soldier, but you don't act like one. Soldiers don't cut prisoners loose, don't waste their last dollar on strangers." Cole poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks drift upward into the darkening sky. "The war was a lot of things," he said slowly. "Started out thinking it was about union, about keeping the country whole. Ended up being about money and land, and who got to decide what freedom meant." He paused. "I killed 37 men, that I know of. Probably more I didn't see fall. Every one of them had a name, a family, a reason they were there that made sense to them." "You remember all 37? Every one. Their faces, anyway. The names are gone." Tala was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "My people have a word, chi-idai, means the ghost of someone who died violently. They stay close to the place they fell, angry, unable to rest." She met his eyes across the fire. "You carry your chi-id with you, all 37. Cole felt the truth of that observation settle into his bones. "Yeah, I guess I do." "Why did you run?" The question was direct, without judgment. Cole appreciated that. "Because I couldn't kill 38. Couldn't look at one more boy in a uniform and pull the trigger just because someone with brass buttons told me to. So I walked away." He laughed without humor. "Turns out you can desert the army, but you can't desert yourself." The ghosts followed. "They always do." The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, lonely and defiant. "What about you?" Cole asked. "Why didn't you run when I cut you loose? You could have disappeared into the desert, been halfway to anywhere by now." Tala's jaw tightened. A tell that Cole was learning meant she was deciding whether to trust him with truth. "Because running alone gets you dead," she finally said. "And because—" She hesitated. "Because my brother used to say that sometimes the universe puts people in your path for a reason. Not divine, my people don't think like that, but more like the land testing you, seeing if you'll do the right thing even when it's hard. And you think that's what this is? A test? Maybe. Or maybe you're just a stupid white man who's going to get me killed." She smiled, the first genuine smile Cole had seen from her. It transformed her face, softening the hard edges, revealing the woman beneath the armor. "But at least you're an interesting, stupid white man." Cole found himself smiling back. They sat in companionable silence as the fire burned down to embers. The desert night was cold, the temperature dropping from furnace to freezer with the sun's departure, and they huddled closer to the dying heat, wrapped in whatever they could scavenge. "3 days to your people," Cole said. "Then what?" "Then you leave, or they make you leave. One or the other." "And you?" Tala's expression grew distant. "I stay. Try to rebuild what was burned. Try to remember how to be more than just angry." She looked at him. "What about you? Where do you go when you're not saving Apache women and getting shot at?" "I don't know," Cole admitted. "I've been running for so long I forgot what I was running toward. Only knew what I was running from." "That's a shitty way to live." "Yeah, it really is." The embers pulsed, orange against the black, like tiny heartbeats counting down to darkness. "Maybe," Tala said quietly, "it's time to stop running. Find something worth standing for instead." Cole thought about that. About the men he'd shot today, the woman he'd freed yesterday, the choices that had led him to this fire and this wash and this endless desert. "Maybe," he agreed. They slept in shifts, taking turns keeping watch, trusting each other just enough to close their eyes, but not enough to sleep deeply. It was a fragile alliance, built on necessity and sealed with violence, but it was more than Cole had known in years. And as he sat under the vast canopy of stars, listening to Tala's breathing even out into something like rest, Cole Rourke allowed himself to think, just for a moment, that maybe redemption wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about what you chose to do next. The desert wind blew cold, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. And for the first time in a long time, Cole didn't feel like he was dying. He felt like he was beginning to live. The second day brought heat that felt personal, like the sun had singled them out for punishment. Cole's lips had cracked despite the water, and every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. But Tala kept moving, her pace relentless, and Cole matched her step for step, refusing to be the one who faltered first. They spoke little during the morning hours, conserving energy and moisture, communicating instead through gestures and glances that were becoming a language of their own. But as the afternoon shadows began to stretch, Tala's stride changed, became more cautious, more deliberate. "What is it?" Cole asked, his voice rough. "We're close to the boundary," Tala said. "The land my people claim, or what's left of it." She pointed to a series of rock cairns barely visible against the landscape, stones stacked in patterns that looked natural to the untrained eye but clearly weren't. "Markers," she explained. "Warnings. Past this point, strangers aren't welcome." "Am I a stranger?" Tala glanced at him, something unreadable in her expression. "You're with me. That makes you complicated." They passed the first cairn, and Cole felt the shift immediately. Not anything physical, but a change in atmosphere, like crossing from one country into another without benefit of ceremony or checkpoint. The land looked the same, but it felt different. Watched. An hour later, Tala stopped abruptly and raised both hands above her head, palms forward. Cole followed her lead, understanding instinctively that this was surrender, or at least a declaration of peaceful intent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a figure materialized from behind a rock formation 50 yards ahead. A young man, perhaps 18, lean and hard-looking, with a rifle cradled in his arms like he'd been born holding it. His eyes locked onto Cole with the flat, evaluating gaze of a predator deciding whether something was prey or threat. "Tala?" The young man's voice carried surprise and something else. Relief, maybe, or disbelief. Kime? Tala replied, her hands still raised. I've come home. The young man, Keme, stepped forward, and two others appeared from concealment, positioned in a triangle that Cole recognized as a classic ambush setup. They'd been waiting, watching, prepared to kill if necessary. Keme's eyes hadn't left Cole. Who's the white man? Someone who helped me, Tala said simply. Helped you or owns you? The question landed like a slap. Tala's hands lowered slowly, her posture shifting into something defensive and dangerous. No one owns me. Not anymore. Not ever again. Kemi studied her face, then Cole's, then back to Tala. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he lowered the rifle, not putting it away, but at least pointing it at the ground instead of Cole's chest. The council will want to see you, Kemi said. Both of you. It wasn't an invitation. They followed Keem and his companions through a maze of canyons and narrow passages that twisted and turned with deliberate confusion. Cole understood the strategy. Anyone tracking them would get lost in minutes, and the defenders would have a dozen opportunities for ambush along the way. Smart. The camp revealed itself gradually. First a few lean-tos tucked against canyon walls, then more substantial structures built from scavenged wood and canvas, and finally a central area where cookfires burned and people moved with the careful efficiency of those who'd learned that survival required constant vigilance. Cole counted maybe 30 souls. Men, women, children, all of them thin, all of them carrying the weight of recent trauma in their eyes and bearing. When they saw Tala, reactions rippled through the camp like wind across water. Some faces lit with joy, others with confusion, and still others with the kind of guarded hope that feared disappointment. An older woman broke from the group and ran toward Tala, her weathered face transformed by emotion. They embraced fiercely, the woman speaking rapid Apache that Cole couldn't follow but understood in his bones. Relief, grief, questions, all tumbling out in a flood of words. Tala answered in the same language, her hands gripping the older woman's arms like anchoring points. When she finally pulled back, there were tears tracking through the dust on both their faces. My aunt, Tala said to Cole in English, she thought I was dead. Almost was, the aunt replied, switching languages with barely an accent. Her eyes found Cole and went cold. This one bring you back? In a way. The aunt's expression suggested she had many thoughts about that answer, none of them particularly charitable toward Cole. But before she could voice them, a commanding voice cut through the camp noise. Tala Redhawk. The crowd parted for a man who moved like violence barely contained. He was perhaps 50, his face a roadmap of scars and hard years, his hair going gray but his body still powerful, coiled with the kind of strength that came from never backing down. His eyes, dark as obsidian, sharp as broken glass, swept over Tala, then locked onto Cole with an intensity that made the desert heat feel cool by comparison. Uncle Neshoba, Tala said, her voice respectful but not submissive. Neshoba closed the distance between them, his gaze never leaving Cole. You bring a white man to our sanctuary. Explain. He saved my life. Cut me free when he could have walked away. Fought beside me when he could have run. White men don't do that, Neshoba said flatly, not without wanting something. This one did. Neshoba's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. He circled Cole slowly, examining him the way a buyer might examine a horse, looking for weaknesses, for hidden flaws, for the lie beneath the surface. Cole stood still and let himself be evaluated. He'd endured worse inspections from officers who saw soldiers as numbers and bodies as ammunition. This felt almost honest by comparison. Your army, Neshoba said. Not a question. Was. Cavalry? Yes. Fought against my people? Cole met those obsidian eyes directly. Not against yours specifically, but against Apache, yes, and Comanche, and anyone else the government decided was standing on land they wanted. A murmur rippled through the watching crowd. Anger, recognition, the sound of wounds being prodded. And now? Neshoba asked. Now I'm nothing. Just a man trying to make one right choice after a lifetime of wrong ones. Noble words. True words, Cole corrected. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or understanding. I came because Tala said she could get me to water, and I followed because dying slower seemed better than dying fast. Everything after that just happened. Neshoba's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his bearing, a slight relaxation, like a rope that had been pulled too tight, easing back by a fraction. Tala Redhawk is blood of my blood. Her brother died defending our village from soldiers who looked like you, spoke like you, carried the same weapons you probably carried. He stepped closer, well inside the boundary of personal space. Give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you right now and leave your body for the vultures. Cole felt the weight of that question, felt the entire camp watching, waiting, hoping maybe for violence that would provide a target for their grief. I don't have one, Cole said quietly. If you decide that's justice, I won't fight it. The answer clearly wasn't what Neshoba expected. His eyes narrowed. You're ready to die? I've been ready for a long time. Dying's easy. Living with what I've done, that's the hard part. For a long moment, silence stretched like wire pulled too thin. Then Neshoba stepped back, his expression unreadable. You'll stay in the camp. You'll work. You'll earn your food and water like everyone else. And if you give me even one reason to doubt you, one moment of disrespect, one act of violence, one sideways glance at our women, I will kill you myself. Slowly. Do you understand? Yes. Say it. I understand. Neshoba turned to Tala. He's your responsibility. His mistakes are your burden. Tala's chin lifted. I accept that. Neshoba nodded once, sharp and final, then walked away. The crowd dispersed slowly, people returning to their tasks but casting frequent glances back at Cole. Some curious, most hostile, all wary. Tala's aunt touched her niece's shoulder. You've brought a wolf into the den. Maybe, Tala agreed. Or maybe I've brought someone who remembers what it's like to be human. The aunt looked doubtful but said nothing more. She guided Tala toward one of the larger structures, leaving Cole standing alone in the center of the camp, feeling the weight of 30 pairs of eyes and the knowledge that his life here would be measured in moments, each one a test he could fail only once. Kime approached, his rifle still carried with casual readiness. You can sleep there, he said, pointing to a space between two rock walls where a threadbare blanket lay folded. No fire, no wandering after dark. Someone will bring you food if they feel generous. If they don't, you go hungry. Clear? Clear. Kime started to walk away, then paused. She spoke for you. That's the only reason you're breathing. Don't waste it. I don't plan to. Plans don't mean shit out here. Actions do. Cole nodded. Kime left and Cole made his way to the designated sleeping area, really just a patch of ground that offered minimal protection from wind and none from suspicion. He sat down, his back against stone still warm from the day's heat, and watched the camp settle into evening routines. Children played near the cook fires, their laughter a strange counterpoint to the adults' grim efficiency. Women prepared food. Not much, Cole noted, portions that spoke of scarce resources and hard times. Men cleaned weapons, repaired tools, spoke in low voices about things that made their expressions harder. This wasn't a community. It was a wound that refused to heal. Tala emerged from the structure where her aunt had taken her. She'd changed clothes, traded the torn dress for leather leggings and a woven shirt that looked both practical and traditional. Her hair, previously tangled and matted, had been braided away from her face, revealing the sharp angles of her cheekbones and the determined set of her jaw. She crossed the camp toward Cole, ignoring the stares and whispered comments her path generated. You look different, Cole said as she settled beside him. I look like myself again. There's a difference. She handed him something wrapped in cloth, dried meat, some kind of flatbread, a handful of berries that looked like they'd been carefully rationed from a precious supply. You don't have to, Cole started. Eat it. You're going to need strength for tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Tala's expression was grim. Tomorrow my uncle tests whether you're worth keeping alive. Cole unwrapped the food, his stomach cramping at the smell despite his intention to refuse charity. What kind of test? The kind where you prove you can contribute, that you're not just another mouth to feed, another burden to carry. She paused. He'll probably want you to hunt, or fight, something that shows you're useful. And if I fail? Then I lose credibility and you lose your life, so don't fail. Cole ate slowly, letting his body process the food in small increments. The meat was tough, gamey, probably rabbit or prairie dog. The bread tasted of mesquite flour and desperation. The berries were tart and precious. "Why did you speak for me?" he asked between bites. Tala was quiet for a long time, her eyes on the fires where families gathered. "Because my brother would have," she finally said. "He believed in measuring people by their actions, not their blood. And your actions, stupid as they were, saved my life." She looked at him. "I don't trust you. Don't mistake this for trust. But I owe you a debt, and my people take debts seriously. I don't want you to owe me anything." Too late. The debt exists whether you want it or not. She stood, brushing dust from her leggings. "Get some sleep. Dawn comes early, and my uncle doesn't believe in second chances." She walked away, and Cole was alone again, with the stars and the smoke, and the knowledge that tomorrow he'd have to prove he was more than just a white man with a guilty conscience. He finished the food, wrapped himself in the thin blanket, and tried to sleep. But the ghosts were restless tonight, all 37 of them, plus the men from the canyon, plus faces he couldn't name but remembered killing. They stood in a circle around him, silent accusers, waiting to see if he'd survive long enough to add more names to their roster. Cole closed his eyes and counted heartbeats until exhaustion claimed him. Dawn arrived with Kimi's boot prodding Cole's ribs. "Up, the uncle wants to see you." Cole rose stiffly, his body protesting the cold night and hard ground. The camp was already awake, people moving with purpose, cook fires being stoked, children being fed portions that looked even smaller than last night's. Kime led him to the camp's eastern edge, where Neshoba waited with 3 other men, all of them older, all of them carrying themselves like warriors who'd earned their scars the hard way. "You hunt?" Neshoba asked without preamble. Some. Some isn't good enough. We need meat, real meat, not the scraps we've been surviving on." He gestured to the open desert beyond the camp. "There's antelope out there, maybe deer if you're lucky. You bring back something worth eating, you stay. You come back empty-handed, you leave. And if you run," he smiled without warmth, "well, you won't get far." Cole understood the subtext. This wasn't just about hunting. It was about trust, capability, and whether a man could do what needed doing when the stakes were survival. "I'll need a rifle," Cole said. One of the other men, gray-haired with eyes that had seen everything and been impressed by nothing, laughed. "White man wants us to give him a gun. That's rich." "You want meat? I need a weapon," Cole replied evenly. "Unless you expect me to run down an antelope and strangle it." Neshoba studied him for a moment, then nodded to Kimi. "Give him the old Springfield. 3 rounds. If he wastes them, that's his problem." Kimi reluctantly handed over a rifle that had seen better decades. The Springfield was old, beaten, the kind of weapon that might fire accurately or might explode in your hands depending on its mood. The 3 rounds were tarnished but looked functional. Cole checked the action, sighted down the barrel, felt the weight and balance. It wasn't good, but it was sufficient. "I'll need water," he said. "1 canteen. Make it last." A canteen was produced, half full, barely enough for a day in the desert. Another test within the test. "Kami goes with you," Neshoba added. He watches, he reports, he makes sure you don't run toward the nearest fort crying for help." Kemi looked about as happy with this arrangement as Cole felt, but he nodded acceptance. "Sun's up," Neshoba said. "You have until it sets. Clock's running." Cole and Keem set out into the desert, walking in silence, the rifle heavy in Cole's hands and heavier in its implications. He was being given just enough rope to either prove himself or hang himself with, and everyone knew it. They walked for an hour before Kimi finally spoke. "You really cut her free?" "Yeah." "Why?" Cole had been asked that question in various forms since the saloon. The answer hadn't changed. "Because it was wrong. What they were doing, what they'd done. I couldn't fix all of it, but I could fix that one thing." Kimi was quiet, processing. "My sister was taken 3 years ago. Soldiers came to our village, said they were relocating us, took her and 5 other girls, said it was for education, for teaching them civilized ways." His voice went flat. "We never saw them again." Cole felt the weight of that loss, the particular grief of not knowing. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back. Kame stopped walking, his hand going up in a signal for silence. Ahead, perhaps 200 yards, a small herd of antelope grazed on scrub, their heads down, their bodies relaxed in the morning warmth. Maybe 8 of them, including a large buck that would feed the camp for days if Cole could drop it. The problem was the distance and the wind. The Springfield was accurate to maybe 150 yards on a good day with good ammunition. Beyond that, it was prayers and luck. Cole dropped to one knee, steadying the rifle, sighting down the barrel. The buck lifted its head, sensing something, not spooked yet, but alert. You get 1 shot, Kimmy whispered, maybe 2 before they scatter. After that, you're chasing ghosts. Cole's finger found the trigger. He breathed out slowly, emptying his lungs, stilling his heartbeat, narrowing the world to the buck's shoulder and the front sight of the rifle. The ghosts gathered around him, 37 faces, watching, waiting, judging. He squeezed. The rifle roared, slamming back against his shoulder with brutal force. Smoke and noise and the immediate aftermath of wondering if the old weapon had held together or blown apart in his hands. Through the dissipating smoke, Cole saw the buck stagger, take 2 steps, and collapse. The herd exploded into motion, scattering in 3 directions, disappearing into the landscape like smoke. But the buck was down. Kame's expression shifted. Not quite approval, but something close to respect. Lucky shot, he said. Probably, Cole agreed. They approached the fallen animal carefully. The buck was dead, Cole's bullet having found the heart and lungs, a clean kill that had prevented suffering. Cole felt the familiar mix of regret and necessity that came with taking a life, even in animals. Keem pulled out a knife and began the process of field dressing, his movements practiced and efficient. Cole helped where he could, following instructions, learning the rituals and practical necessities of preparing meat in the desert heat. My father taught me this, Keem said as he worked. Said that when you take a life, you honor it by wasting nothing. The meat feeds us. The hide gives us shelter. The bones become tools. The blood returns to the earth. Sounds like a wise man. He was. Soldiers shot him in the back while he was running to protect my mother. The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Cole had no response that wouldn't sound hollow. They worked in silence, butchering the carcass, packing the meat in cloth Keem had brought, leaving the parts that couldn't be carried for the scavengers, who would perform their own kind of honoring. The sun had climbed to its apex by the time they finished. The journey back to camp would take hours, carrying the weight of fresh meat and heat that wanted to spoil it. We need to move fast, Kimi said. They did, pushing hard, the meat wrapped and protected as best they could manage. Cole's shoulder ached from the rifle's kick. His legs burned from the pace, but he kept moving, driven by the knowledge that failure now, after success, would be worse than never having tried. They reached the camp as the sun was touching the western horizon, both of them soaked with sweat, stumbling with exhaustion. The meat was still good, still salvageable, still enough to feed people who'd been hungry for too long. Neshoba met them at the camp's edge, his eyes going immediately to the bundled meat, to Kime's face, back to Cole. Well? He dropped a buck at 200 yards with the first shot, Kime reported. His tone was neutral, but there was something underneath, grudging respect maybe, or at least acknowledgement of competence. Clean kill, no waste. He helped with the butchering, didn't complain, kept pace all the way back. Neshoba's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted slightly, a fractional relaxation that spoke volumes to those who knew how to read him. Give the meat to the women, they'll prepare it. Kemi took the bundles and headed toward the cook fires, where exclamations of joy and surprise erupted as people realized what he carried. Neshoba stepped closer to Cole, his voice low enough that only they could hear. You passed one test. Don't think that means you've passed them all. I don't. Good. Because tomorrow brings different challenges, and the day after that brings more. You want to stay here, you earn it every single day. I understand. Do you? Neshoba's eyes were hard. Because I don't think you fully grasp what you've walked into. These people, my people, they've lost everything. Homes, family, future. All they have left is each other and the slim hope that maybe, somewhere, there's still a place for them in this world. He paused. You represent everything that took that from them. Every time they look at you, they see the men who burned their villages, who killed their children, who broke treaties and promises like they were nothing. I know, Cole said quietly. Then you also know that one good hunt doesn't erase that, doesn't balance the scales. You could bring meat every day for a year and some of these people would still want you dead. Why are you telling me this? Neshoba's smile was thin and sharp. Because Tala spoke for you and I respect her judgment even when I question her choices. And because despite everything, despite what you are and what you represent, you did something today that mattered. You contributed. You proved you're more than just a burden. He leaned in. But the moment you stop being useful, the moment you become a threat, or even just a reminder of too much pain, you're gone. One way or another. Fair enough? Fair has nothing to do with it. This is survival. Neshoba walked away, leaving Cole standing alone as the camp erupted into activity around the fresh meat. Women worked with practiced efficiency, transforming the kill into food that would be rationed carefully, stretched as far as possible, made to feed more people than it reasonably should. Tala appeared at his side, her expression carefully neutral. You did well. I got lucky. Luck is just skill waiting for opportunity. She paused. My uncle won't admit it, but he's impressed. That was a difficult shot. It was the only shot I had. Sometimes that's the best kind. They watched the preparations together, standing close but not quite touching. Two people connected by circumstance and something neither could quite name. What happens now? Cole asked. Now you eat. Rest. Tomorrow they'll find something else for you to prove. And after that? Tala looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting firelight. After that, we see if you can survive long enough to stop being a white man with a gun and start being just a man. Is that possible? I don't know, she admitted, but I guess we're going to find out. The camp settled into evening routines, the smell of cooking meat filling the air with a richness that spoke of temporary abundance. Children laughed, a sound that had been absent before, or at least muted by hunger. Adults moved with slightly less tension, their shoulders not quite so rigid, their expressions not quite so hard. One successful hunt hadn't healed anything, but it had reminded people that survival could include moments of grace, that the desert could still provide, that tomorrow might not be quite as bleak as today. Cole ate his portion, small but enough, and listened to the conversations flowing around him in Apache and broken English. He couldn't understand most of the words, but he understood the tone. Relief, gratitude, and underneath it all, the persistent current of grief that no amount of meat could satisfy. Kimmy sat down beside him, chewing thoughtfully. Tomorrow, Uncle wants you to help repair the water catchment. It's been leaking, losing half of what we collect. I can do that. You know engineering? I know how to fix things that are broken. Learned it in the cavalry. You're in the field, something breaks, you fix it or you die. Kim nodded, filing that information away. You asked earlier why I'm here, why I'm helping watch you. I did. It's because Tala's like a sister to me. Her brother and I grew up together, hunted together, fought together. When he died, I promised him I'd look after her. Kimmy's jaw tightened. So when she brings a white man into camp and stakes her reputation on him, I need to know if you're worth that risk. And your conclusion? Still forming it. You can shoot. You can work. You haven't tried to run or cause trouble. He paused. But I've seen men fake good behavior long enough to get what they want. So I'm watching, every day, every choice you make. I'd expect nothing less. Good. Because the day I decide you're a threat to her or to this camp, you won't see me coming. Kem stood and walked away, leaving Cole with the clear understanding that he lived in a space between acceptance and execution, and that the distance between the two could be crossed in a heartbeat. The fires burned low as the camp prepared for sleep. Tala made her rounds, speaking with her aunt, with Neshoba, with others who seemed to hold positions of authority or respect. Cole watched her move through the community, seeing how people's faces softened when she approached, how they leaned in to hear her words, how they trusted her in ways they would never trust him. She was home. Damaged, haunted by loss, but home. Cole wasn't sure he'd recognize home if he saw it. Later, when the camp had quieted and the sentries had taken their positions, Tala came to where Cole sat wrapped in his thin blanket. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For not making me regret speaking for you. Day's not over yet. She smiled, that rare transforming expression that reminded him there was more to her than just survival and anger. No, but you're still alive. The camp has meat, and my uncle hasn't killed you. That's a successful day by any measure. Low bar. Out here, every bar is low. We celebrate what we can. She settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, a gesture of trust, or at least temporary alliance. Tell me something true, she said. About what? About you. About who you were before the war made you into someone else. Cole thought about that question, reaching back through years of violence and running to try and find the person he'd been. I wanted to be a teacher, he said finally. Before the war, I was studying history, philosophy, wanted to spend my life helping people understand the past so they wouldn't repeat its mistakes. What happened? The war happened. I was 17, full of idealism and stupidity in equal measure. Thought I could make a difference, could help build something better. He laughed bitterly. Turns out, all I was good at was killing, and by the time I realized that, I'd killed so many people that teaching seemed like a joke. What right did I have to educate anyone when I'd failed at the most basic lesson, that every life matters? Tala was quiet for a long moment. My brother wanted to be a healer, studied with our medicine woman, learned about plants and prayers and how to set bones. Her voice was soft, distant. The soldiers shot him before he could help a single person. All that knowledge, all that potential, just erased. I'm sorry. I know you are. And I know you're not the man who killed him. But you wore the same uniform, carried the same flag, believed the same lies. She looked at him. So tell me, how do I reconcile that? How do I sit here with you, share food with you, trust you, when men exactly like you destroyed everything I loved? It was the most honest question anyone had ever asked him. I don't know, Cole admitted. I'm not sure you can. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe the smart thing is to see me as the enemy I was and protect yourself accordingly. That would be simpler. Yeah. But nothing about this is simple. No. They sat in silence as the stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent to the struggles of the tiny lives below. The desert wind carried the smell of sage and smoke and the promise of another punishing day to come. When I was in that saloon, Tala said quietly, chained up, being sold like an animal, I made myself a promise. I promised that if I survived, I would never again let someone else define my worth. Not white men, not circumstances, not even my own people. She turned to face him fully. You cutting me loose? That was my choice coming true. My promise manifesting, and that means something, even if I can't fully explain what. Cole met her eyes. I'm glad it meant something, because that choice has cost me everything else. Was it worth it? He thought about his last silver dollar, about the desert, and the violence, and the tests he'd barely passed. Thought about sitting here, alive, beside someone who saw him clearly, not as a hero or a villain, but as a complicated, flawed, trying human being. Yeah, he said. It was. Tala nodded once, then stood. Get some sleep, Cole Rourke. Tomorrow the desert finds new ways to test us. She walked away, and Cole wrapped himself tighter in his blanket against the cold. Above him, the stars blazed in patterns that civilizations had mapped and named and used for navigation. But Cole wasn't navigating toward anything. He was just trying to stay alive long enough to figure out if redemption was real or just another story people told themselves to make the darkness bearable. The ghosts gathered close, 37 strong, and for once they didn't feel like accusers. They felt like witnesses. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The water catchment was a marvel of necessity. Canvas stretched over a wooden frame, angled to funnel the rare desert rain into barrels buried partially in the ground to keep the water cool. But time and harsh weather had taken their toll. The canvas was torn in 3 places, the wooden frame had warped, and the barrels showed signs of cracking along the seams. Cole stood examining the damage in the early morning light, Keem beside him with arms crossed and expression skeptical. Can you fix it? Keem asked. Depends on what materials you have. Not much, some rope, scraps of leather, whatever we can scavenge from abandoned settlements. Cole walked around the structure, testing joints, examining weak points. his mind automatically cataloging problems and solutions. The cavalry had taught him to improvise with nothing, to make repairs that would hold just long enough to matter. "I'll need help," Cole said. "2 people, maybe 3, and I'll need access to whatever supplies you mentioned." Kimmy studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll get you what you need." By mid-morning, Cole was working with 2 young men, brothers named Ahiga and Naalnish, both in their early 20s, both watching him with the wary hostility of people who'd learned that trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. They followed his instructions grudgingly, handing him tools and materials with the minimum communication necessary. The work was hot, precise, and frustrating. The wooden frame needed to be disassembled partially, the warped pieces soaked in what little water they could spare, then bent back into shape using techniques Cole had learned from a carpenter in his unit who'd built bridges under enemy fire. Hours passed. The sun climbed to its zenith and began its descent. Cole's hands were raw, his back screaming from bending over the frame, his throat dry despite the rationed sips of water Kime brought periodically. But the frame was taking shape again, straightening, strengthening. Ahiga, the older brother, finally spoke beyond monosyllables. "Where'd you learn this?" "Army. We built a lot of things that needed to not fall apart." "Like the forts you used to cage my people?" The accusation was direct, unadorned by diplomacy. "Yeah," Cole said simply. "Like those?" Ahiga's jaw tightened, but he didn't walk away. Instead, he picked up another piece of wood and held it steady while Cole worked to secure it. "Why are you here?" Nalnish asked. "Really? No one believes the story about just helping Tala." Cole paused, wiping sweat from his forehead with a sleeve that was already soaked. "Because the war hollowed me out. Because I spent 5 years killing people for reasons that stopped making sense. Because one day I looked at myself and didn't recognize what I'd become." He met Naalnish's eyes. "And because when I saw Tala on that platform, I saw a chance to do one thing that wasn't about destroying. So I took it." "One good act doesn't erase 5 years of bad ones," Ahiga said. "No, it doesn't, but it's a start." The brothers exchanged glances, some silent communication that excluded Cole entirely. Then Ahiga shrugged. "Frame's not going to fix itself. Keep working." It was as close to acceptance as Cole was going to get. By evening, the frame was repaired and reinforced. The canvas, patched with leather scraps and waterproofed with a mixture of tree sap and animal fat that one of the camp women had prepared, was stretched tight and secured. The barrels had been resealed using techniques Cole improvised from his memory of fixing water casks on long marches. Neshoba came to inspect the work as the sun touched the horizon. He walked around the catchment slowly, testing the frame's stability, examining the canvas repairs, checking the barrel seals. His face revealed nothing. "Will it hold?" he finally asked. "Through the next rain, yes. After that, depends on how hard the weather is and how well it's maintained. And if it fails, then you rebuild, same as everything else out here." Neshoba's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but something less hostile than his usual demeanor. "You did acceptable work. The camp thanks you." It was the closest thing to praise Cole had received, and coming from Neshoba, it felt like a battlefield commendation. As Neshoba walked away, Tala approached from the direction of the cook fires. She looked tired, her face drawn, but there was something lighter in her bearing than the previous days. "My aunt says you've earned a full portion tonight. That's high praise from her." "I just fixed what was broken. Out here, that's everything." She gestured toward the center of camp where people were gathering. "Come. There's a council meeting. You should hear what's discussed." "I'm not part of the council." "No, but you're part of the camp now, whether anyone likes it or not, and what gets decided tonight affects you." Cole followed her to the central gathering space where perhaps 20 adults sat in a rough circle around a small fire. Neshoba presided from the north position, his authority understood rather than declared. Tala's aunt sat to his left, and other faces Cole had seen but didn't know occupied the remaining positions. Cole and Tala sat on the circle's outer edge, present but not participating, witnesses rather than voices. Neshoba began speaking in Apache, his tone measured and serious. Cole couldn't understand the words, but he read the body language. People leaning in, nodding, occasionally interjecting with comments or questions. The discussion was intense, focused, the kind of conversation where lives hung in the balance. After perhaps 20 minutes, Neshoba switched to English. Whether for Cole's benefit or simply because the topic demanded it, Cole couldn't tell. "We have a problem," Neshoba said. "Scouts report that the slaver who sold Tala, the one our white friend encountered in the saloon, has been asking questions, offering money for information about where she might have gone." A murmur rippled through the circle. "How much money?" someone asked. "Enough to tempt desperate people. And there are many desperate people in the borderlands right now." Tala's hand found Cole's arm, her grip tight. "He's coming for me," she said quietly. "We don't know that for certain," Neshoba replied. "But we must prepare as if he is. This camp's location has remained secret because we've been careful, because we've limited contact with outsiders. But secrets don't stay buried forever." "What do you propose?" Tala's aunt asked. "We have 3 options. We can move the camp, pack everything, abandon this location, find new territory. We can fortify here and prepare for conflict. Or," he paused, his eyes finding Cole, "we can send someone to the slaver, someone who can get close, gather information, perhaps end the threat before it reaches us." The implication was clear. Everyone turned to look at Cole. "You want me to kill him," Cole said. Not a question. "I want you to solve a problem," Neshoba corrected. "How you solve it is your choice. But the slaver knows your face, knows you bought Tala. He might believe you've come to sell her back, to negotiate, to profit from circumstances. And if he doesn't believe that, if he sees through whatever story I tell, then you improvise, or you die. Either way, the camp learns something useful." Tala stood abruptly. "No, this is using him as bait, as a sacrifice you're willing to make because his life means less than ours." "His life means exactly what it's worth," Neshoba replied calmly, "which is measured by what he contributes. This is contribution. This is murder disguised as strategy. This is survival disguised as nothing. The slaver is a threat. Threats must be eliminated." Cole stood slowly, feeling the weight of 30 pairs of eyes. "I'll do it," he said. Tala whirled to face him. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do. Your uncle's right. The slaver's looking for you because of what I did. That makes this my responsibility. You'll die." "Maybe. But I've been dying slowly for 2 years. At least this way it means something." The council was silent, watching this exchange like spectators at a play they'd seen performed before with different actors. Neshoba nodded once, satisfied. "You leave at dawn. Keme will guide you close to the town, then you're on your own. If you succeed, return here. If you fail," he shrugged, "we'll hear about it eventually. And if I run? If I just disappear into the desert and never come back? Then Tala loses credibility. I lose face for allowing you into the camp, and you live with the knowledge that you condemned these people to constant fear because you were too weak to face your choices." Neshoba's eyes were hard. "But I don't think you'll run. Running's what you did before. This time, I think you'll stand." Cole wanted to argue, to point out the insanity of sending one man against what was likely a group of armed slavers. But Neshoba was right about one thing. Running had stopped being an option the moment Cole cut Tala free. The council dispersed, people returning to their shelters and fires, the evening routines resuming as if they hadn't just casually discussed sending a man to his probable death. Tala grabbed Cole's arm and pulled him away from the gathering, toward the camp's edge where privacy was possible. "This is insane," she said, her voice tight with anger and something else. Fear maybe, though she'd never admit it. "My uncle's using you. Can't you see that?" "Of course I can see it, but that doesn't make him wrong. You're going to die for people who barely tolerate you. I'm going to try not to die while solving a problem I created. There's a difference." Tala's hands clenched into fists. "I spoke for you. I vouched for you. That makes your death my burden. No one's dead yet. Cole—" He caught her hands, uncurling her fists, holding them between his own calloused palms. "Listen to me. That slaver's not going to stop looking. And even if he doesn't find this camp, he'll find somewhere, someone. He'll keep taking people, keep selling them, keep profiting from misery. Someone needs to stop him." "Why does it have to be you?" "Because I'm the only one he might let get close. Because your people can't risk exposure. Because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Maybe this is how I start balancing the scales." Scales don't balance through more killing. Then what? I just let him keep hunting you? Keep threatening this camp? I don't know. The words burst out of her, raw and honest. I don't have answers, Cole. I just know that I watched my brother die, watched my village burn, watched everything I loved turn to ash. And now, just when I thought maybe there was something worth protecting again, you're going to throw your life away on some redemption quest that won't redeem anything. Cole pulled her closer, their foreheads almost touching. What would your brother have done? If he'd been in my position? Tala's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He would have done exactly what you're doing, and I would have hated him for it too. They stood like that for a long moment, two people caught between impossible choices and the wreckage of worlds that had collided too hard. Promise me something, Tala finally said. What? Promise you'll come back. Not for honor, not for redemption, not for any noble reason. Just come back. Cole wanted to make that promise, wanted to believe he could keep it, but he'd made too many promises he couldn't keep, watched too many men die who'd sworn they'd see their families again. I promise I'll try, he said instead. That's all I've got. Tala pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. It'll have to be enough. She walked away quickly, disappearing into the shadows between shelters, leaving Cole alone with the night and the knowledge that dawn would come whether he was ready or not. He spent the remaining hours checking the Colt, rationing his ammunition, 5 rounds still, each one precious, and trying to form some kind of plan that didn't end with him face down in the dirt with a bullet in his spine. Kimi found him just before midnight, carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. Supplies, he said, dropping the bundle at Cole's feet. Dried meat, water for 2 days, some herbs that'll help with pain if you get shot. Optimistic. Realistic. Kemi crouched down, his expression serious. I still don't trust you completely, but you've worked hard, contributed, haven't caused trouble. That counts. High praise. It's all I've got. Kimi paused. The slaver you're going after, his name's Dalton Creech. He runs a network that stretches from here to Santa Fe. Guards, contacts, people who owe him favors or fear. You can't just walk up and shoot him. Wasn't planning on it. Then what's your plan? Cole had been asking himself the same question. Get close, assess the situation, adapt. That's not a plan. That's hope disguised as strategy. You have a better idea? Kimi was quiet for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. This is poison, very fast acting. Mix it with whiskey, and a man dies before he realizes what's happening. Cole stared at the pouch. You're giving me poison. I'm giving you options. Shooting's loud, attracts attention. Poison's quiet, looks like bad luck or too much drink. Your choice which to use. Cole took the pouch, feeling its weight, so light, yet so heavy with implications. Why help me? Because Tala cares about you, even if she won't admit it. And because I promised her brother I'd protect her. Kemi stood. If killing this slaver keeps her safe, then I want you to succeed. If you die trying, at least you died useful. You really know how to motivate a man. Motivation's overrated. Results are what matter. Kim left and Cole tucked the poison pouch next to his ammunition. Tools of death, different method, same outcome. He didn't sleep that night, just sat watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the camp's breathing, the soft sounds of children sleeping, the murmur of adults talking in low voices, the crack and pop of dying fires. This place wasn't his home, these people weren't his family, but somehow, in the span of a few days, they'd become something worth protecting. Dawn came cold and clear. Kimi was waiting at the camp's edge with 2 horses, one for riding, one for supplies. The animals looked as worn as everything else in the camp, but they were alive and functional. Town's a day's ride southeast, Kimi said. I'll take you within sight, then you're alone. Cole mounted awkwardly, his body protesting the unfamiliar motion. He'd ridden plenty during his cavalry days, but that felt like a lifetime ago. Tala appeared from between shelters, moving quickly. She carried something wrapped in cloth, a bundle similar to the one Keem had brought the night before. Take this, she said, handing it up to Cole. He unwrapped it to find a knife, not the folding knife he carried, but a proper hunting blade, its edge honed to razor sharpness. its handle wrapped in leather that had been worked until it was soft as silk. "It was my brother's," Tala said quietly. "He would want you to have it." Cole felt the weight of that gift. Not just the physical blade, but everything it represented. "Tala, I can't." "You can. You will." Her eyes met his, fierce and determined. "And you'll bring it back. Understood?" "Understood." She stepped back, her arms crossed over her chest like armor against emotion. Neshoba emerged from the central area, his presence commanding attention without effort. "You know what needs to be done," he said to Cole. "I do." "Then do it. Or don't come back." It was the kind of send-off that made no pretense of sentiment or false encouragement. Cole appreciated the honesty. Keem led the way out of camp, the horses picking careful paths through the rocky terrain. Cole glanced back once and saw Tala still standing there, a solitary figure outlined against the growing light. Then she was gone, hidden by stone and distance. The ride was long and silent. Keem navigated by landmarks Cole couldn't identify. A strangely shaped rock formation here, a dried creek bed there, patterns in the earth that spoke a language Cole hadn't learned. By late afternoon, they crested a rise and Kimi pointed to the east. "There, that's the town." Cole saw it, a larger version of the dying settlement where he'd first found Tala. More buildings, more people, more of the desperate infrastructure that grew in places where law was a suggestion and violence was currency. "Creech operates out of the saloon on the north end," Kimi said. "Big building, red facade. You can't miss it." "What's his routine?" "Drinks heavy in the afternoons, does business in the evenings, usually has 2 or 3 men with him. He's careful but arrogant, thinks he's untouchable." "Everyone thinks that until they're touched." Kem studied Cole's face. "You've done this before. Killed up close, personal. War's full of up close and personal." "This isn't war, isn't it?" Cole gestured toward the town. "He wages war on people who can't fight back. Seems like war to me." Keem considered that, then nodded slowly. "Fair point." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a worn hat, different from the one Cole wore. "Change hats. Different silhouette. Harder to recognize at a distance. And if anyone asks, you're a bounty hunter looking for work." Cole switched hats, feeling the unfamiliar weight settle on his head. "One more thing," Kimi said. "If you get caught, if they torture you for information about the camp, I won't tell them anything." "You say that now. But pain has a way of changing perspectives." "Then I guess I better not get caught." Kimi's expression might have been approval or might have been skepticism. With him, it was always hard to tell. "Good luck, white man." "Cole. My name's Cole." "I know, but you haven't earned me using it yet." Kemi turned his horse and rode back the way they'd come, disappearing into the landscape like he'd never been there at all. Cole sat alone on the rise, looking down at the town where a man named Dalton Creech bought and sold human lives like commodities. The Colt was heavy at his hip. The poison was a weight in his pocket. Tala's brother's knife was a promise sheathed at his belt. And somewhere in his chest, 37 ghosts waited to see if he'd add another name to their number, or join them in whatever cold accounting waited beyond death. Cole urged his horse forward, down the slope, toward the town and whatever came next. The saloon was exactly where Keem had described it, a building that had pretensions of grandeur but had settled for gaudy instead. The red paint was peeling, the sign proclaiming Creech's Palace hung crooked, and the windows were grimy with dust and smoke residue. Cole tied his horse to the hitching post alongside a dozen others and pushed through the doors. The interior was marginally cleaner than the saloon where he'd bought Tala, but not by much. The same smell of unwashed bodies and spilled alcohol, the same desperate men nursing drinks and grievances, the same piano music played by someone who'd learned enough to be dangerous but not enough to be good. And at a table in the back, holding court like some minor emperor, sat Dalton Creech. Cole recognized him immediately, the embroidered vest, the tarnished silver buttons, the smile that suggested he found the world amusing and cruel in equal measure. His shoulder was still bandaged from where Cole had shot him, but he seemed unbothered by the injury. 2 men flanked him, both armed, both watching the room with the kind of attention that came from expecting trouble. Cole approached the bar, ordered whiskey with the few coins Keem had provided, and settled in to observe. Creech was conducting business, a steady stream of people approaching his table, conducting brief conversations, money and papers changing hands. Some transactions ended with handshakes. Others ended with threats delivered in voices too low for Cole to hear, but loud enough in implication. After an hour, the traffic slowed. Creech leaned back in his chair, sipping his drink, looking pleased with himself and the world he'd carved out through violence and exploitation. Cole made his decision. He picked up his whiskey and walked straight to Creech's table. The two guards tensed immediately, hands moving toward weapons. "Easy," Cole said, raising his free hand. "I'm not here for trouble." Creech's eyes narrowed, studying Cole's face. Recognition flickered. "I know you. You're the fool who shot me over an Apache whore. I'm the man who paid you for her. What happened after was just bad luck on both our parts." "Bad luck?" Creech laughed. "That's one way to put a bullet in my shoulder." "You lived. I'd say that's good luck." The guard still hadn't relaxed. Cole stood very still, acutely aware that one wrong move would end this conversation permanently. "What do you want?" Creech asked. "To make you an offer." "I'm listening." Cole leaned in, lowering his voice. "The woman I bought, Tala. She's worth more than the dollar I paid. You know it. I know it. I've got information about where she is, where she's hiding. Figured you might be willing to pay for that information." Creech's expression shifted, suspicion warring with greed. "Why would you sell her out? Thought you were playing hero." "Heroes starve in the desert. I need money. You need information. Simple business." "Nothing simple with you, friend. You already shot me once." "Self-defense. Your men attacked first." "Semantics." Creech drummed his fingers on the table, thinking. "How do I know your information's good?" "Because I've been to her camp, met her people, know exactly how many fighters they have, what weapons, what supplies." Cole paused. "And I know they're not expecting an attack." The greed was winning. Cole could see it in Creech's eyes, the calculations happening, the potential profit being weighed against the risk. "What do you want for this information?" $50, and a horse that won't die before I make it to the next territory." $50? For one squaw? For a whole camp of them. Tala's not alone. There's maybe 15, 20 people worth selling. You take the lot, you make thousands. Creech's smile widened. "Now we're talking business." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. Let's discuss details." Cole sat, every nerve screaming that this was the moment. The knife at his belt, the poison in his pocket, the Colt at his hip. 3 ways to end this, each one carrying its own risks. Creech poured whiskey from a bottle on the table. Expensive stuff, not the rotgut being served at the bar. "Drink with me," he said. "Seal our arrangement." Cole's hand moved to his pocket, feeling the poison pouch. All he needed was a moment of distraction, a second where Creech wasn't watching. But the guards were attentive, and Creech's eyes never left Cole's face. "You first," Cole said, gesturing to the bottle. Creech laughed. "Smart. Don't trust me. I like that." He poured himself a generous measure and drank it down without hesitation. "See? Not poisoned. Not yet, anyway." He poured a second glass and slid it toward Cole. This was it, the moment of choice. Drink and maintain the pretense, or refuse and reveal his hand. Cole picked up the glass, brought it to his lips. And the saloon doors exploded inward. 3 men burst through, guns drawn, moving with military precision. Behind them, more figures, a dozen, maybe more, spreading out to cover exits and angles. Creech's guards reached for their weapons but froze as rifles were leveled at their heads. "Don't move," one of the newcomers barked. "U.S. Marshal." Everyone stays calm. Nobody dies. Cole's hand had instinctively moved toward his Colt, but he forced himself to stillness. The marshals were searching the room with hard eyes, looking for threats, for resistance. Their leader, a gray-haired man with a badge pinned to his vest and a scar running from temple to jaw, walked straight to Creech's table. "Dalton Creech, you're under arrest for human trafficking, kidnapping, and about 15 other charges I'll read to you once we get you in irons." Creech's face had gone pale. "You've got no jurisdiction here. This is free territory." "Jurisdiction's wherever I say it is. Now stand up nice and slow." The marshal's eyes swept over Cole, assessing, categorizing. "Who are you?" Cole's mind raced. The truth would raise questions he couldn't answer. Lies would unravel under scrutiny. Nobody, just a man having a drink. With Dalton Creech? Try again. I was trying to sell him information. Turns out I should have done more research on my customers. The marshal studied Cole's face, his bearing, the way he held himself. You're military. Or were. Cavalry. Discharged 2 years back. Why were you selling information to a known slaver? Cole met the marshal's eyes directly. Because I'm broke, desperate, and not proud of my choices. But I hadn't sealed any deal when you came through that door, so legally, I haven't done anything wrong. It was a thin argument, built on technicalities that might not survive a determined prosecutor. But it was all Cole had. The marshal considered, then nodded. Get out of here. If I see you again, I'll assume you're part of Creech's operation and treat you accordingly. Understood. Cole stood slowly, leaving the whiskey untouched on the table, and walked toward the door. Every step felt like walking through knee-deep water, expecting a bullet or a shout to stop him. But neither came. He made it outside, untied his horse, and rode away at a pace that was quick without being panicked. Only when the town had disappeared behind a ridge did he allow himself to breathe fully. The marshals had Creech. The threat was ended, not by Cole's hand, but ended nonetheless. The question now was whether that counted as success or failure, and whether Neshoba would care about the distinction. Cole rode through the night, pushing the horse harder than was wise, driven by the need to put distance between himself and the town. By dawn, he could see the familiar rock formations that marked the territory near the camp. Keme met him at the boundary, materializing from behind a boulder with his rifle ready. "You're alive," he said, sounding almost disappointed. "Surprisingly, yes." "Creech?" "Arrested. U.S. Marshals raided the saloon. He's going to prison, probably hanging." Keme's expression didn't change. "So you didn't kill him?" "Didn't have to. The law did my job for me." "The law?" Keme's tone suggested he had opinions about the law's effectiveness and reliability. "And you just happened to be there when the marshals arrived?" "Lucky timing." "You don't strike me as a lucky man, Cole Rourke." It was the first time Keem had used his name. They rode back to camp in silence, arriving as the sun climbed toward noon. People stopped their work to watch Cole dismount, their faces showing curiosity mixed with surprise that he'd returned at all. Neshoba emerged from the central shelter, Tala beside him. Her eyes found Cole's immediately, searching for injuries, for signs of what had happened. "Well?" Neshoba asked. "Creech is in custody. Federal marshals took him last night. He's going to trial, likely execution." "You didn't kill him yourself?" "No." Neshoba's jaw tightened. "I sent you to eliminate a threat, not to rely on white man's law that's never protected us." "The threat's eliminated. The method shouldn't matter." "The method matters when it shows whether you're willing to do what needs doing or if you'll look for easier paths." Cole felt anger rising, hot and sharp. "I was prepared to kill him, had multiple ways planned, but the marshals got there first, and I adapted. That's not taking an easier path. That's being smart enough to let circumstances work in my favor." Tala stepped between them. "He came back. He solved the problem. Isn't that enough?" Neshoba's eyes never left Cole's face. "For now. But there will be other problems, other threats. And eventually, he'll have to prove he's willing to get his hands dirty instead of relying on outside intervention." "Then I'll prove it when the time comes," Cole said. "But I'm not going to apologize for finding a solution that didn't require more killing." The standoff lasted another heartbeat. Then Neshoba nodded curtly. "You completed your task. You have another day's grace in this camp." He walked away, and the crowd dispersed, returning to their routines. Tala grabbed Cole's arm and pulled him toward the camp's edge, toward privacy. "What really happened?" she asked, once they were alone. Cole told her everything. The approach to Creech, the attempted poisoning, the timely arrival of the marshals. When he finished, Tala was quiet for a long moment. "You could have died. That was always the likely outcome. But you didn't, and Creech is gone, and the camp is safer." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "My uncle's wrong. You did what needed doing. The how doesn't matter as much as the result. Your people might disagree. Some will, some won't. That's the nature of people." She touched his face gently, her fingers tracing the new lines of exhaustion and stress. But I don't disagree. You came back. That's what matters to me. Cole caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. I promised I'd try. And you kept that promise. First one anyone's kept to me in a long time. They stood like that, connected by touch and survival, and something neither was quite ready to name, while the camp breathed around them and the desert wind carried the smell of safety. Temporary, fragile, but real. Whatever came next, whatever tests Neshoba designed or circumstances delivered, Cole knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was done running. This place, these people, this woman, they were worth standing for. And if that eventually cost him his life, at least it would mean something. The ghosts gathered close, 37 strong, and for the first time they felt less like accusers and more like witnesses to something that might eventually resemble redemption. The days that followed Creech's arrest settled into a rhythm that felt almost like peace. Cole worked alongside the camp's men, repairing structures, hunting when game could be found, standing watch during the long desert nights. The hostility hadn't vanished, but it had dulled to something more like wary coexistence. Tala spent her days teaching the younger children, passing on knowledge her brother had shared with her about plants, about reading the land, about survival techniques that had kept her people alive for generations. Cole watched her sometimes, saw the way her face softened when she worked with the children, how she laughed at their questions and answered with patience that seemed infinite. It was during one of these moments, Cole repairing a shelter's roof, while Tala taught a group of children nearby, that Kimi approached with an expression that immediately signaled trouble. Riders, he said quietly, coming from the south, moving fast. Cole climbed down from the roof, his hand instinctively checking the Colt. How many? Scout counted 8, maybe more trailing behind. Armed? All of them. And they're not trying to hide their approach. Neshoba was already gathering the camp's fighters, maybe a dozen men and women, all carrying weapons that ranged from old rifles to bows to farming implements that had been repurposed for violence. It wasn't an army, but it was what they had. Get the children to the caves, Neshoba ordered. Women who can't fight, go with them. Everyone else, defensive positions. The camp erupted into controlled chaos. Mothers grabbed children, the elderly helped each other toward the natural cave system that honeycombed the canyon walls behind the camp. Tala was moving toward the caves with her students when Neshoba's voice stopped her. Not you. I need every fighter we have. Tala's aunt protested immediately. She's just recovered from... She's the best shot we have after Keem. She fights. Tala didn't argue. She handed her youngest student to another woman, grabbed a rifle from the weapons cache, and took position behind a rock formation that offered cover and clear sightlines to the camp's southern approach. Cole found himself beside her, the Colt drawn, his cavalry training flooding back despite the years between then and now. You know how to use that properly? Tala asked, gesturing to his revolver. I remember the basics. Basics get you killed. Aim for center mass, breathe out before you fire, and for the love of everything sacred, don't waste ammunition on shots you can't make. Thanks for the refresher course. She almost smiled. You're welcome. The riders appeared over the southern ridge exactly where Kime's scout had predicted. 8 men on horseback, all armed, all moving with the kind of purpose that suggested they knew exactly where they were going. As they drew closer, Cole could make out details. These weren't random drifters or opportunistic bandits. They wore remnants of uniforms. Confederate gray mixed with civilian clothes, the patchwork appearance of men who'd survived a lost war and hadn't found peace in its aftermath. The leader was a big man, barrel-chested, with a beard that obscured most of his face and eyes that held the particular emptiness of someone who'd seen too much death and decided to embrace it rather than flee from it. They stopped just outside rifle range, and the leader raised a hand in what might have been a peaceful gesture or might have been mockery. You in the camp! His voice carried easily across the distance. We're not here for trouble, just looking for someone. Neshoba stepped forward, his rifle held ready but not yet aimed. This is private land. You're trespassing. The leader laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Private land? That's funny. Last I checked, this whole territory was up for grabs for anyone strong enough to hold it. He spat into the dirt. But like I said, we're not here for your camp. We're looking for a deserter. Man named Cole Rourke. Used to ride with the cavalry before he grew a yellow streak and ran. Cole's blood turned to ice. Tala's hand found his arm, her grip fierce. Don't, she whispered. But Neshoba was already looking in Cole's direction, his expression unreadable. What's this deserter to you? Neshoba called back. Army put a price on his head. $500, dead or alive. We aim to collect. $500. Cole's stomach churned. That was enough money to feed this entire camp for months, enough to buy weapons, supplies, medicine, enough to tempt anyone. And if we haven't seen this man, then we keep looking. But here's the thing about deserters. They tend to hide in places where folks don't ask too many questions. Places like, he gestured at the camp. This. Neshoba's jaw tightened. Cole could see the calculation happening. Weigh the bounty against the principal. Measure $500 against the integrity of shelter. Uncle, no, Tala said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You gave him sanctuary. Sanctuary means something. Sanctuary isn't worth dying over, one of the other fighters muttered. The leader must have heard something in the exchange because his smile widened. So you do know him. Make this easy on everyone. Hand him over, we leave peaceful. You maybe get a share of the bounty for your trouble. Cole made his decision. He stood, stepping out from behind cover, his hands raised. I'm Cole Rourke. No! Tala tried to grab him, but he was already moving, walking toward the open ground between the camp and the riders. Cole, get back here! Neshoba's voice carried command and fury in equal measure, but Cole kept walking. He'd spent 2 years running, and he was done. If this was where it ended, at least it would be on his terms. The leader's eyes lit with recognition and greed. Well, didn't think it'd be this easy. You're just going to surrender? I'm going to make you an offer, Cole said, stopping about 30 yards from the riders. You want me? You've got me. But leave the camp alone. They gave me shelter not knowing who I was. That's not their crime. Noble, stupid, but noble. The leader gestured to 2 of his men. Take him. They dismounted and started forward, hands on their weapons, confident in their numbers and firepower. Cole's hand dropped to the Colt. I wouldn't, he said quietly. The 2 men paused. You gonna shoot us, deserter? You got what, 5, maybe 6 rounds in that old gun? There's 8 of us. Math doesn't work in your favor. Math never does. But I guarantee I take at least 3 of you before I go down. Question is, which 3 want to die for $500 split 8 ways? The math was stark when presented that way. $60-some per man, minus 3 dead men, leaving 5 to split the bounty. Suddenly, the profit margin looked a lot thinner. The leader's expression darkened. You threatening my men? I'm stating facts. You want me, you'll get me. But it's going to cost you. The question is whether it's worth the price. For a long moment, tension stretched like wire pulled too tight. Then movement erupted from the camp. Not surrender, but defiance. Kemi stepped out, his rifle raised and aimed at the leader. Then Ahiga and Naalnish, the brothers who'd helped Cole repair the water catchment. Then Tala, her weapon steady, her face set with determination. One by one, the camp's fighters emerged from cover, forming a loose line behind Cole. Not an army, but a statement. Neshoba was the last to step forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. You want him, you go through all of us. The leader's confidence flickered. 8 men against maybe 15, in terrain the defenders knew intimately, with their backs against families they'd die to protect. The equation had shifted dramatically. This your final answer? The leader asked. It is. The leader studied the line of fighters, the camp behind them, the rocks and shadows that could hide a dozen ambushes. Whatever he saw there convinced him that $500 wasn't worth the blood it would cost. This isn't over, he said. Bounty doesn't expire. We'll be back with more men, better weapons. And next time, we won't be so polite. Next time, we'll be ready, Neshoba replied. The leader wheeled his horse around, his men following suit, and they rode back over the ridge. But the threat hung in the air like smoke, real, visible, poisonous. When they disappeared from sight, Cole turned to face Neshoba, expecting fury or demands, or at minimum an order to leave immediately. Instead, Neshoba was smiling, not warmly, but with something that might have been respect. You walked out there ready to die. Seemed like the right move. It was a stupid move, but it was also brave. Neshoba's smile faded, and it gave me information I needed. What information? That you value these people more than your own survival, that when pressed, you chose sacrifice over safety. He paused. That's the mark of someone worth keeping alive. Tala was suddenly in front of Cole, her hand connecting with his face in a slap that cracked like a rifle shot. "Don't you ever do that again," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Don't you dare just walk out there and—" Cole caught her hand before she could slap him again. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't let them threaten the camp because of me. So you'd rather die. Just throw yourself at them like some kind of—" She stopped, her eyes glistening. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to make me care about you and then sacrifice yourself. That's not fair. Nothing about any of this is fair. No, it's not." She pulled her hand free, wiped her eyes roughly. "But we deal with it anyway. Together. You understand? Together." Before Cole could respond, Kimi's voice cut through the moment. "They'll be back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And they'll bring reinforcements." "I know," Neshoba said, "which means we have a choice. We can run, abandon this camp, find new territory, or we can fortify and prepare for war." "If we run, we'll always be running," Tala's aunt said. "There's always another bounty hunter, another threat, another reason to flee. When does it end?" "When we make it end," Neshoba replied. He turned to address the entire camp, his voice carrying to everyone gathered. "This place is ours. We built it from nothing. We've buried our dead in this ground, raised our children in these shelters. I say we defend it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, but there were dissenting voices too. Against an army of bounty hunters? That's suicide. Better to die fighting for home than to die running toward nothing. The argument built, voices rising, fear and determination clashing like storm fronts. Cole found himself speaking before his brain fully engaged. "You don't have to fight them at all." Everyone turned to look at him. "What are you suggesting?" Neshoba asked. "I leave. Tonight. Take enough supplies to reach the next territory, and I disappear. Without me here, they've got no reason to attack the camp. They'll search anyway, tear the place apart looking for you. Not if I leave a trail. Make it obvious I've gone. Head in a direction that takes them away from here. By the time they figure out I've disappeared into the desert, this camp will be old news." Tala grabbed his arm. "You're talking about walking into the desert alone. That's death. Maybe. But it's my death, not yours. Not theirs." He gestured to the children being herded back from the caves, to the families clustered together in fear. "I've caused enough harm in my life. I won't add this camp to the list." "Noble speech," Neshoba said, "but tactically flawed. You leave a trail, they follow it. When they don't find you at the end, they double back and come here angry. Angry men are dangerous men." "Then what do you suggest?" Neshoba's expression turned calculating. "We give them what they want, or at least what they think they want." Over the next hour, a plan took shape. Dangerous, potentially suicidal, but with the kind of audacious simplicity that might actually work. They would stage Cole's death. The camp would create evidence of a fight, blood, a grave, a body that could pass for Cole's at a distance. When the bounty hunters returned, they'd find the camp grieving, the stranger who'd brought trouble upon them, supposedly killed by those he'd tried to protect. "They'll want proof," Kimi pointed out. "Won't just take our word for it." "Then we give them proof," Neshoba said. "Enough to convince them, not enough to prove it's false later." "And what happens to the real Cole Rourke?" Tala asked. "He disappears, becomes someone else, lives in the shadows of this camp until the heat passes." It was a gamble built on lies and hope in equal measure, but it was better than the alternatives. They began preparations immediately. Ahiga and Nyalnish dug a grave in the hard earth, deep enough to look legitimate. Women prepared bundles that could pass for a body wrapped for burial. Kimi slaughtered a goat, letting its blood stain the ground near Cole's sleeping area to suggest violence. And Cole himself sat with Tala as the sun set, both of them acutely aware that this might be the last time they could be seen together openly. "This is insane," Tala said. "Most good plans are. And if it doesn't work? If they dig up the grave or demand to see the body?" Then we improvise, same as always. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. I'm tired of improvising, tired of threats and violence and never feeling safe. I know. When does it end, Cole? When do we get to stop fighting just to survive? He didn't have an answer. Couldn't promise her peace or safety or any of the things she deserved. I don't know, he said honestly, but I promise you this. Whatever comes, we face it together. No more sacrificial gestures, no more walking into danger alone. Together. You mean that? I do. She lifted her head, looked at him with eyes that held the weight of everything they'd survived and everything they still faced. Then kiss me, before you become a dead man. Cole did, and for a moment the world narrowed to just that. Her lips on his, her hand curled in his shirt, the taste of desert dust and desperate hope. When they pulled apart, night had fallen fully, and stars blazed overhead in their millions. Tomorrow I'm buried, Cole said. And tomorrow I'm reborn as… what? What do I become? Whoever you need to be to survive. It would have to be enough. The next morning arrived with the kind of cruel beauty that made the desert seem almost benevolent. Cole watched from inside a storage shelter, cramped, airless, but invisible to outside eyes, as the camp performed the theater of his death. Neshoba addressed an imaginary audience, his voice carrying the right mix of regret and anger. The stranger brought death to our doorstep. When we refused to surrender him, he fought his way out, killed 2 of our men before we brought him down. It was a good story, built on the kind of logic bounty hunters would understand. A deserter fighting to survive, a camp defending itself, the inevitable, bloody conclusion. Women wailed convincingly. Children cried real tears. Not for Cole, who they barely knew, but for the men Neshoba claimed had died. Men who were actually standing guard at the camp's perimeter. The grave was filled with rocks and dirt, a crude marker placed at its head. And then they waited. 2 days passed. Then 3. Cole remained hidden, emerging only at night to stretch, to breathe air that didn't taste of confinement, to steal moments with Tala, who brought him food and water and news. No sign of them yet, she reported on the 3rd night. Scouts say the territory's clear. They're coming, just taking their time, maybe gathering reinforcements like they promised. Or maybe they've given up, decided you weren't worth the trouble. Men like that don't give up. The bounty's too large and their pride's been challenged. He was right. On the 4th day, the scouts reported riders, not 8 this time, but 20, an actual force, armed and organized, moving with military precision toward the camp. Cole watched from his hiding place as they arrived, as the leader from before dismounted and approached Neshoba with barely contained violence in his bearing. We came back like we promised. Now where's the deserter? Neshoba pointed to the grave. There, you're too late. The leader stared at the fresh-turned earth, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally calculation. He's dead? Fought like a demon when we tried to contain him after your first visit. Killed 2 of my men before we put him down. I want to see the body. Too late for that. We buried him 2 days ago. Desert heat doesn't wait. The leader's eyes narrowed. Convenient. Very convenient. He gestured to 2 of his men. Dig it up. Cole's heart hammered. This was the moment, the test they'd hoped to avoid, but had prepared for anyway. The men approached the grave with shovels, began excavating. The camp watched in tense silence as dirt flew, as the hole deepened, as the bundles they'd placed came into view. One of the diggers reached down, grabbed the cloth, pulled, and stopped. Boss, you're going to want to see this. The leader approached, looked into the grave, and his face went through a complicated series of expressions. Cole couldn't see what they saw from his vantage point, but he could see the reaction: shock, disgust, and finally grim satisfaction. That's him, the leader said, or what's left of him. He turned to Neshoba. You really did kill him. Damn. Like I said, he fought. We defended ourselves. The leader rubbed his jaw, thinking. Army's offering 500 for him dead or alive. I'll need proof, something to show we found him. Neshoba had anticipated this. He produced a knife, Cole's folding knife, the one he'd carried since the war, and handed it over. This was his, had initials carved in the handle. The leader examined the knife, found the crude CR that Cole had etched years ago during a long night on watch. This'll do. He pocketed the knife, then looked at the grave again. Seems a shame, all that effort for a corpse. That's the nature of hunting. Sometimes the prey dies before you can claim it. The leader nodded slowly, then signaled his men. Mount up, we're done here. But one of the younger bounty hunters, barely 20, with eyes too eager and hands too quick, stepped forward. Wait, how do we know they're telling the truth? Could be any body in that grave. The leader's patience was clearly wearing thin. You see the knife? See the grave? What more proof do you need? I need to see his face. Need to be sure. The body's been buried for days in this heat. There won't be much face left to see. Then it won't take long to check. The young man moved toward the grave before anyone could stop him, reaching down into the bundles, pulling cloth aside, and recoiled with a cry of disgust. Christ, that's foul. The leader walked over, looked down, and his expression confirmed what the young man had seen. Satisfied? He asked coldly. The young man nodded, stumbling away from the grave, his face green. Yeah, that's definitely a dead man. What they'd seen, Cole learned later, was the body of a man who'd died 3 weeks prior, one of the camp's elderly, who'd succumbed to illness and whose family had agreed to this deception as a final service to the community. The body had been prepared, positioned, and concealed well enough to pass cursory inspection. It was grim, practical, and exactly the kind of desperate measure that survival demanded. The bounty hunters mounted up, the leader pausing one last time. Sorry for your losses, and for the trouble we brought. It might have been the closest thing to an apology such men were capable of. They rode away, and this time the scouts confirmed they kept riding, south toward civilization, toward wherever they'd collect their bounty and find their next hunt. The camp erupted in celebration, quiet, controlled, but genuine. They'd faced down an army and won through cunning rather than violence. Cole emerged from hiding as the sun set, his body aching from days of confinement, his mind reeling from how close they'd come to disaster. Neshoba met him at the storage shelter's entrance. You're dead now, he said. Cole Rourke is buried in that grave. The bounty's been claimed, the threat is past. So what am I? Whatever you choose to be. But you can't be Cole Rourke anymore. That name's poison now. Tala appeared beside her uncle, her expression fierce. He can be whoever he wants. But he stays. That's not negotiable. Neshoba looked between them, Cole exhausted and reborn, Tala defiant and protective, and something shifted in his face. The camp council meets tomorrow. We'll discuss it then. He paused. But for what it's worth, you've proven yourself more than I expected. The vote won't be unanimous, but I suspect it'll be favorable. He walked away, leaving Cole and Tala alone in the gathering darkness. Did that actually work? Cole asked. Somehow, yes. And now I'm dead. Only on paper. Where it counts, you're very much alive. She took his hand. Come on. You need food, water, and about a week's worth of sleep. In that order? In whatever order keeps you vertical long enough to reach the shelter. They walked through the camp together, and Cole felt the difference immediately. People nodded as he passed, not with acceptance exactly, but with acknowledgement. He'd earned something through his willingness to die for them, through the reckless gesture that had forced the camp to choose whether he was worth protecting. They'd chosen him. It was more than Cole had hoped for and exactly what he'd needed. That night, lying in the shelter Tala had insisted he share with her family, Cole stared at the stars through a gap in the roof and thought about the man he'd been, the soldier, the deserter, the ghost stumbling through the desert with his last silver dollar. That man was dead, buried in a grave that bore his knife as evidence. What remained was something new, forged by fire and desperation, and the stubborn belief that people were worth saving even when the world suggested otherwise. Tala's breathing evened out beside him, her hand resting on his chest like an anchor. And Cole Rourke, or whoever he was now, closed his eyes and slept without ghosts for the first time in years. The council meeting the next morning was brief and surprisingly unanimous. Cole would stay, but under conditions. He'd work, he'd contribute, he'd submit to the community's decisions and respect its traditions. And he'd take a new name. Tala suggested it, spoken in Apache, and then translated for those whose English was stronger. Ashki Nez, the tall boy, a name that acknowledged his height and his newness to their world. It wasn't his name, but it would do. In the days that followed, Cole, now Ashki, to everyone but Tala in private moments, settled into a life he'd never imagined possible. He hunted with Kim, who'd progressed from barely tolerating him to something approaching friendship. He worked alongside Ahiga and Alnish on projects that strengthened the camp's infrastructure. He learned words in Apache, stumbling over pronunciations that made children giggle and elders smile with patient amusement. And every evening, he sat with Tala and talked about futures that felt possible for the first time. "We should build something," Tala said one night. "Not just survive, but create. Something that lasts beyond us." "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet, but something that proves we were here, that we mattered." Cole understood that need, to leave a mark that wasn't destruction, to build instead of tear down. "We'll figure it out," he promised. "Together." But the desert had other plans, and peace, as always, was temporary. The attack came 3 weeks after the bounty hunter's departure, sudden and brutal, launched by men who had nothing to do with Cole's past, but everything to do with the camp's present. And this time, there would be no clever deceptions or lucky interventions. This time, survival would demand blood. The attack came at dawn, when the camp was most vulnerable. Fires being stoked, sentries changing shifts, people emerging from shelters with sleep still heavy in their eyes. Cole heard the first gunshot while hauling water from the spring. The sound cut through the morning calm like a blade through silk, and his body reacted before his mind fully processed the threat. He dropped the bucket and ran toward the camp, his hand finding the Colt that had become as familiar as breathing. What he saw made his blood turn to ice. Men on horseback, at least 15, maybe 20, were pouring into the camp from the southern approach, firing rifles and pistols with the kind of wild abandon that spoke of men who'd lost their humanity somewhere along the path of too much violence. But these weren't bounty hunters looking for a specific target. These were raiders, and they wanted everything the camp had. Cole saw Dalton Creech riding at their center, his face twisted with rage and triumph, his shoulders still bandaged but his gun hand steady. The marshals hadn't held him. Or he'd escaped. Or someone had paid his bail. The details didn't matter. What mattered was that he'd returned with an army, and he'd come for vengeance. "Thought you could make a fool of me?" Creech's voice carried over the chaos. "Thought I'd just disappear into a cell while you people lived free?" Gunfire erupted from the camp's defenders. Kime was already in position behind the rocks, his rifle barking methodically. Ahiga and Naalnish had grabbed weapons and were firing from the shelter where they'd been sleeping. Neshoba appeared from the central structure, his face set with the grim determination of a man who'd fought this fight too many times before. But they were outnumbered and outgunned, caught unprepared by an enemy that had learned from their previous encounter. Cole reached the nearest defensive position, a low wall of stacked stones, and took cover beside Tala, who was loading her rifle with hands that shook only slightly. "Where did he get this many men?" she gasped. "Doesn't matter. We have to hold them off long enough to evacuate the children. They're blocking the canyon exit. There's nowhere to evacuate to." She was right. Creech had positioned his men strategically, cutting off the escape routes, turning the camp into a killing ground. A bullet struck the stone inches from Cole's head, sending chips flying. He returned fire, the Colt bucking in his hand, and saw one of the raiders fall from his horse. But there were too many, and they were pressing forward with the confidence of men who knew they held every advantage. "Fall back to the central structures," Neshoba's voice cut through the chaos. "Create a perimeter." The defenders retreated in stages, providing covering fire for each other, moving with the practiced coordination of people who'd drilled for this scenario, but hoped it would never come. Cole found himself shoulder to shoulder with Kemi, both of them firing and reloading in a rhythm that came from different wars, but resulted in the same desperate efficiency. "How many rounds you got?" Kim asked between shots. "Maybe a dozen." "Make them count." A raider broke through the defensive line, charging toward the shelters where women and children had taken refuge. Cole pivoted, aimed, fired. The man went down hard, his momentum carrying him forward until he lay still just yards from his target. But for every raider that fell, 2 more pressed forward. Creech was shouting orders, directing his men with tactical precision that suggested military training. He'd learned from his first encounter with the camp, adapted his strategy, and now he was executing a plan designed to overwhelm through sheer force. "We can't hold this," Ahiga called out. Blood was streaming from a wound on his arm, but he kept firing, kept fighting. Neshoba's face was carved from stone, but Cole saw the calculation in his eyes, the terrible arithmetic of realizing they were losing. "Then we buy time," Neshoba replied. "Every minute we hold is another minute for the women to fortify the inner shelters. And when we run out of minutes, then we make our stand count for something." Cole felt the weight of those words. This wasn't about victory anymore. It was about making their deaths expensive enough that the survivors, if there were survivors, would have a chance. Tala grabbed his arm, her eyes fierce despite the fear he saw underneath. "There's another way out, a narrow passage through the canyon wall. My brother and I used to explore it when we were children." "Can it fit everyone?" "The women and children, yes. Fighters, maybe. But someone has to hold the camp long enough for them to escape." Cole understood immediately. Someone had to sacrifice. Someone had to become the wall that couldn't be breached until it was too late for the raiders to pursue. "Show them the way," he said. "Get them out." "Not without you." Tala, "No. We do this together or not at all. You promised." She was right. He had promised. No more sacrificial gestures. No more walking into death alone. "Then we hold them here," Cole said. "All of us. Long enough to evacuate everyone else." He turned to Neshoba. "There's a passage. Narrow. Hidden. Tala knows it. We can get the non-fighters out, but we need to hold this position for at least 20 minutes. Neshoba's expression flickered. Surprise, calculation, and finally grim acceptance. 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours with this many attackers. "Then we make it 21 minutes, whatever it takes." Neshoba studied Cole's face, seeing something there that satisfied whatever question he'd been asking. "Tala, get your aunt. Get the children. Everyone who can't fight moves now." Tala hesitated, torn between duty and the man beside her. "I'm a fighter. I should stay." "You're the only one who knows the passage well enough to guide them in the dark. You have to go." It was the right argument, and Tala knew it. Her jaw clenched, but she nodded. 20 minutes. You hold for 20 minutes, then you follow. Promise me." "I promise." She kissed him hard, desperately, like she was trying to memorize the taste of him. "Don't you dare die, Ashkenaz." Wasn't planning on it. She ran toward the inner shelters, shouting instructions in Apache and English, organizing the evacuation with the same fierce efficiency she brought to everything. Cole turned back to the fight and found Creech advancing, his men providing covering fire, his expression promising terrible things. "You think you can hide behind rocks forever?" Creech called out. "I've got ammunition and time. You've got neither." Cole aimed carefully and fired. The bullet struck Creech's horse, and the animal reared, throwing its rider. Creech hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. It bought them maybe 30 seconds. "Conserve ammunition," Neshoba ordered. "Only shoot when you've got a clean target." The defenders tightened their perimeter, creating interlocking fields of fire that made advancing costly. 3 more raiders went down, and the attack faltered as the survivors realized this wasn't going to be the easy massacre they'd anticipated. But Creech was getting to his feet, rage replacing calculation, and rage made men dangerous in different ways. "Burn them out!" he screamed. "Set fire to everything!" 2 raiders produced torches, rags wrapped around sticks, doused in oil, already burning. They threw them toward the nearest shelters, and flames caught immediately on the dry wood and canvas. Smoke began to billow, thick and black, reducing visibility and making breathing difficult. "How long?" Kimmy coughed out. Cole glanced toward the shelters where Tala had disappeared. He couldn't see movement, couldn't tell if the evacuation was proceeding or if they were trapped by the flames. 10 more minutes, he said, though he had no idea if that was accurate. A raider made it through the smoke, appearing suddenly like a demon from the haze. Cole grappled with him, the man's knife slashing toward his throat. They went down hard, rolling in the dirt, each trying to gain advantage. The raider was younger, stronger, desperate. But Cole had fought too many close-quarters battles, carried too many scars from encounters just like this. He got his hand on the man's wrist, twisted, heard bone crack. The knife fell, and Cole's fist connected with the raider's jaw once, twice, until the man went limp. Keem pulled Cole to his feet. "They're flanking left!" Cole turned and saw the movement. 4 riders circling wide, trying to get behind their position. If they succeeded, the defensive perimeter would collapse. Neshoba, Cole called out. We've got company on the left flank. Well, Neshoba saw the threat and made a decision that would have been insane under any other circumstances. Charge them. Break their line before they break ours. It was cavalry tactics, the kind of desperate assault that worked one time in 10 and got everyone killed the other 9. But they were out of good options, and desperate measures were all that remained. 6 defenders, Cole, Kame, Neshoba, Ahiga, Nalnish, and an older man named Terak, whose sons had died in the village raid, rushed forward, firing as they ran, screaming challenges that came from throats raw with smoke and fear. The shock of the assault caught the flanking riders off guard. 2 went down immediately, their horses panicking and bolting. The remaining 2 wheeled around, trying to bring their rifles to bear, but Cole was on them, pulling one from his saddle, using the man's body as a shield against his companion's fire. The bullet meant for Cole struck the raider instead, and the shooter's face registered horror at killing his own man. That moment of hesitation cost him everything. Kemi's rifle barked, and the last flanker fell. But the assault had cost them. Terak was down, clutching a stomach wound that was bleeding too fast. Naalnish was limping badly, his leg torn open by a bullet that had found flesh instead of bone by inches. They fell back to the perimeter, dragging their wounded, and Cole saw that the flames had spread. Half the camp was burning now, smoke so thick it was like fighting in a fog. How long? Neshoba gasped. Before Cole could answer, a child's scream cut through the chaos, high, terrified, coming from the direction of the inner shelters. Cole's heart stopped. He ran toward the sound, through smoke and fire, his lungs burning, his eyes streaming. He found the source, a girl, maybe 6 years old, separated from her mother in the confusion, frozen with fear as flames crept closer. Cole scooped her up without breaking stride, shielding her body with his own as he navigated back through the inferno. A burning beam fell across his path, and he leaped over it, feeling the heat sear through his boots. He made it back to the perimeter and handed the girl to one of the women who'd stayed to help the wounded. Tala appeared through the smoke, her face streaked with soot and tears. Everyone's through. The passage is clear. We have to go now. The wounded are coming. Kame and Ahiga are helping them, but we need to leave before the whole camp collapses. Cole looked around at what remained of their defensive position. The fire had done what the raiders couldn't. It had made holding impossible. They'd bought their 20 minutes and then some, but now staying meant dying. Fall back, Neshoba ordered. Everyone to the passage. Move! The remaining defenders retreated in stages, covering each other, firing at shadows and shapes in the smoke. Cole was the last through the perimeter, his Colt empty now, reduced to a club if needed. The passage Tala had mentioned was barely visible, a crack in the canyon wall that looked too narrow for human passage but widened once you squeezed through. They moved single file, the wounded supported between fighters, everyone focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Behind them, Creech's voice echoed through the burning camp. Find them! They can't have gone far! But the smoke provided cover, and by the time the raiders realized the camp was abandoned, the defenders were deep in the passage, navigating by touch in darkness so complete it felt like being buried alive. They emerged an hour later on the far side of the canyon, exhausted, smoke-damaged, grieving for what they'd lost but alive. Tala counted heads in the gray dawn light. Everyone made it, all 27 of us. It seemed impossible, miraculous, but the evidence was there. Families clustered together, children clinging to mothers, fighters slumped against rocks with their weapons still ready. They'd survived. Cole found a rock and sat heavily, his body finally registering all the injuries he'd ignored during the fight. Burns on his arms, cuts across his ribs, bruises that would turn spectacular colors in the coming days. Tala knelt beside him, her hands gentle as she examined the damage. You're hurt. I'm alive. That's more than I expected. You kept your promise. You came through the passage. Barely. Thought I was going to get stuck at that narrow part. She smiled through her tears. Would have been embarrassing. Ashki Nez, the tall boy who got wedged in a rock crevice and had to be left behind. My legacy would have been very disappointing. They laughed, the slightly hysterical laughter of people who'd survived something they shouldn't have. Neshoba approached, his face grim, but something like approval in his eyes. You fought well, all of you. We held long enough, and now we're here. Where is here exactly? Kame asked. far side of our territory. There's a spring about 2 miles north. We can rest, regroup, figure out next steps." "Next steps," Ahiga said bitterly. "Our home is gone, burned to ash. What next steps are there?" "The ones that involve staying alive and building again," Neshoba replied. "We've lost camps before. We'll lose them again. But as long as we survive, we can rebuild." "He's right," Tala said, standing to address the group. "My brother used to say that home isn't a place, it's people. And we still have each other." She looked at Cole, her eyes holding a question. "And we have new family. People who've proven they'll stand with us when it matters." Cole felt the weight of those words, the acceptance they represented. "What about Creech?" Nalnish asked. "He'll keep coming, keep hunting." "Maybe," Cole said. "Or maybe he thinks we died in the fire. Either way, we have time to prepare." But as it turned out, Creech's hunt was ending in a way none of them anticipated. 3 days later, as the survivors established a temporary camp near the spring, a lone rider approached. He wore a marshal's badge and carried the exhausted look of a man who'd been riding hard for too long. Neshoba met him at the camp's edge, rifle ready. "State your business." "Looking for an Apache camp that might have had contact with a slaver named Dalton Creech." "You found us. What's left of us, anyway." The marshal's expression softened. "He hit you hard. He tried. We survived." "Well, you can stop looking over your shoulder. Creech is dead. His own men turned on him after the camp raid. Apparently burning out a camp of women and children was a bridge too far even for outlaws. They shot him and left his body in the desert." Cole emerged from the camp, his burns bandaged, his expression carefully neutral. "You're sure he's dead?" The marshal's eyes narrowed, studying Cole. "You look familiar. I've got one of those faces." "Maybe." The marshal didn't look convinced, but he also didn't look inclined to pursue it. "Creech is dead. I saw the body myself. Whoever you people are, whatever trouble you've had, that particular thread is finished." He tipped his hat and rode away, leaving the camp in stunned silence. "It's over," Tala said quietly. "Actually, over." Cole wanted to believe it, wanted to think that threats could be permanently eliminated, that safety was achievable. But the desert had taught him that peace was always temporary, that new dangers would always emerge. What mattered was being ready, and having people worth fighting for. Over the following months, the camp rebuilt, not in the same location, but in a new one, carefully chosen for its defensibility and resources. They built structures that were more permanent, dug wells that went deeper, created something that felt less like survival and more like actual living. Cole worked alongside everyone else, his new name becoming natural, his past fading into something that felt distant and almost like it had happened to someone else. He and Tala built a shelter together, working side by side, arguing about placement and design in the way people do when they're building not just a structure, but a future. "The door should face east," Tala insisted. "Morning light is important." "Morning light is also how people see in to shoot you. Door should face the rocks." "You're paranoid." "I'm cautious. There's a difference." They compromised, door facing southeast, giving them light and protection in equal measure. On the day they finished the shelter, Neshoba called a council meeting. The entire camp gathered, and Cole noticed that his presence no longer generated hostile stares. He'd become part of the fabric of this community, woven in through sweat and blood and stubborn refusal to quit. "We've survived," Neshoba began. "We've rebuilt. We've proven that we're stronger than the threats that seek to destroy us. But survival isn't enough. We need to create something that lasts." "What do you propose?" Tala's aunt asked. "A crossing. A place where travelers can rest safely, where trade can happen without exploitation, where different people can meet without violence." He paused. "A place that proves the desert doesn't have to be about death. It can be about connection." The idea took root quickly. Over the next year, they built it. Not just a camp, but a way station, a crossing point between territories where people could trade goods and information, where water and basic supplies were available for fair prices, where the rules were simple: no violence, no exploitation, no questions about where people came from or what they were running from. It became known simply as the crossing, and stories spread about the Apache woman and the white man who ran it, who'd built something impossible in the harshest land imaginable. Cole stood at the edge of the crossing one evening, 5 years after cutting Tala free in that filthy saloon, and marveled at what they'd created. Trading wagons lined up at the well, families camped peacefully in the designated areas, children of different backgrounds playing together without understanding why that was supposed to be remarkable. Tala joined him, her hand finding his like it always did. "Thinking about ghosts?" she asked. Cole smiled. The ghosts still visited sometimes, 37 faces that would never fully leave, but they felt different now. Less like accusers and more like witnesses to what he'd become. "Thinking about choices," he said. "How one decision, one stupid, reckless, probably insane decision, led to all of this." "You mean cutting a stranger free with your last dollar?" "Yeah, that. Best dollar you ever spent." "Best dollar I ever spent," he agreed. In the distance, Neshoba was settling a dispute between traders, his authority unquestioned, his wisdom earned through decades of surviving in a world designed to break his people. Keme was teaching a group of young men how to track, passing on knowledge that had saved their lives countless times. Ahiga and Naalnish were repairing a wagon wheel, their easy banter speaking to the peace they'd found after so much violence. And everywhere Cole looked, he saw life continuing, not just surviving, but actually thriving in small, defiant ways. "We should expand," Tala said. "Build more structures, create a real town instead of just a way station." "Ambitious. We've earned ambitious. After everything we've survived, we've earned the right to dream bigger." Cole pulled her close, feeling the solid reality of her against him, proof that good things could emerge from terrible circumstances. "Then let's dream bigger," he said. They stood like that as the sun set, painting the desert in colors that made it look almost gentle. And for the first time in his life, Cole Rourke, now Ashkenaz, now simply Cole again to the woman beside him, felt like he'd finally found what he'd been searching for through all those years of war and running and desperate survival. Not redemption exactly, that was too grand, too final, but purpose, belonging. A reason to wake up each morning that wasn't just avoiding death but actively building life. The ghosts gathered one last time, 37 strong, and Cole acknowledged them with the respect they deserved. They were part of him, part of his story, part of the cost of becoming who he was. But they didn't define him anymore. What defined him now was the crossing he'd helped build, the woman whose hand he held, the community that had chosen to trust him despite every reason not to. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Years later, long after Cole and Tala had grown old together, long after the crossing had become a thriving settlement that appeared on actual maps, travelers would stop and ask about the founders. "Who built this place?" they'd ask. And the people who remembered, the children who'd been saved from the burning camp, now grown with children of their own, would tell the story. They'd speak of an Apache woman who'd survived being chained and sold, who'd refused to let cruelty define her future. They'd speak of a white man who'd given his last dollar for a stranger's freedom and found his own in the process. They'd speak of a community that had been burned out and beaten down, but had risen from the ashes stronger than before. And they'd point to the memorial at the crossing's center, a simple stone marker with two names carved in English and Apache, Tala Redhawk and Ashki Nez, the founders who'd proven that even in the harshest land, courage and choice could rewrite fate. Some stories ended in tragedy, the old ones would say. But this one ended in hope. And hope, it turned out, was the most valuable currency in the desert, worth more than silver, more than gold, more than all the blood that had been spilled in the name of conquest and greed. Hope was what survived when everything else had burned. Hope was what they'd built. Hope was what remained. The desert wind blew constant and eternal, carrying the scent of sage and possibility, whispering to anyone who'd listened that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about what you chose to build with the pieces that remained. And Cole and Tala had built something that would outlast them both, a place where strangers could become family, where violence gave way to peace, where the impossible became simply the way things were. The crossing stood for generations, a testament to the stubborn belief that people were worth saving, that choices mattered, that even one silver dollar spent in the right way could change the course of countless lives. And somewhere, in whatever realm ghosts inhabited when their witnesses no longer needed them, 37 souls rested easier knowing that the man who'd carried them had finally laid down his burden and picked up something better. A future. a family, a home.